We are now live.
All right, good evening, everybody. Sorry we're a little bit late. I take that responsibility. We're opening the school board, Santa Rosa City School Board meeting for August 26, 2020, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And it really helps me if you unmute and we can kind of all say this together. And I think I'm going to face the sunset tonight. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States
States of America,
and to the republic
the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
with liberty
and
and
justice for all.
Okay, that's how it sounds in real time, I think, when we all say it together, no matter what. All right, as is my usual, I'd like to really just ground us a little bit before we start. And tonight I'm really thinking about the word feedback. And this will be really quick. Feedback is really information back to us. It's back to the board that we want your feedback. The district administration wants your feedback. Your teachers want your feedback. And feedback is information. It's not good, it's not bad, it's not critical, it's just information. And sometimes this feedback comes to us with smiles, and sometimes it comes to us with anger and frustration, and maybe a lot of that lately as we were gearing up for school. But I want to make sure that we continue to get your feedback because we don't know how things land. A lot of times we think we know how things are going to land, but we don't know until it's really right there on people's doorsteps or people's computer screens or what's happening in people's houses. So I just want to encourage us to continue to take feedback and just act on that. And it's complex and it's diverse because that feedback is complex and it's diverse. And of course, our job, the mission and vision of the board is about policy, and it's about raising the bar for all kids, raising the floor for all kids, and with equity at our core. So that's where we are, but we don't know that until we really hear from folks. So continue to give us that feedback. That's my word for the night. All right. Thank you. So we're on, we did not have any actions taken in closed session. For action, do we have any statements of abstention, board members? I don't see any. And of course, everybody's going to be doing this for me so I can see it. And we have adjustments to the agenda. So do I have a motion on that adjustment to the agenda? Director Medina.
Yeah, I'd like to request that we remove item E4.
I'll second that.
Okay, E4 for us here is an action item. It's oral recommendation regarding deputy superintendent and assistant superintendents, 3 of them, salary and fringe benefits, a discussion and board vote on deputy superintendent and assistant superintendents, employment agreements. Okay, so that was do we have any discussion on that?
Just hoping that it comes back to kind of future.
Okay. That was moved by Director Medina and seconded by Director McCormick, I believe. Dina, may we have that vote, please?
It was seconded by Jen Close.
Thank you. Director Close.
Director Lopez.
Yay.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Director Close.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye. All right, thank you. We are going to be postponing that. We will bring that to us at the next board meeting. It is time for public comment. Moderator, and we have 3 minutes per person. Moderator, do we have any comments from the public on non-agenda items?
So now we're going to officially call for public comment on non-agenda items. Please click raise hand at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to make a public comment, and we'll let you know when it's your turn to speak. And we do have some raised hands. We're going to start with Tom Zabata.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And thank you for our first 2 weeks of distance or week and a half of distance learning. As far as feedback, our students are sitting, they're not socializing anymore. So they're basically sitting in front of the computers for the first 3 or 4 hours of the morning. And what we found is the student assignments aren't getting assigned to them to 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Can we have a student-wide policy for at least the upper grades where those assignments are posted by 9 a.m. so the students aren't constantly checking Google Classroom and they have more time to get those assignments done by the 3 p.m. deadline that day? And I think, it's, a teacher-wide time limit of 9, maybe 10 in the morning, so students aren't constantly looking for work and they can use their time more efficiently instead of waiting and worrying. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next public comment is Abby. Abby, if you could please state your full name for the record before you give your comment.
Hi, my name is Abby Peterson. I'm a parent of a Rankin Valley Middle School student. I appreciate that right now is a very difficult moment for our entire Santa Rosa community, but I'm extremely worried over the way that state mandates for distance learning are being applied at my son's middle school and throughout the district. When we got our son's schedule the week before school started, we were really hopeful. We heard there are going to be 3 80-minute blocks per day, 4 days a week, and that sounded really good to us, and we were really hopeful. But in reality, the way that schedule is being applied, his teachers are holding Zooms, those synchronous meeting times, for just a small portion of the 80-minute block. And after maybe 20, 25 minutes or so, the teachers just sign off and the kids are left to work completely on their own. And I know there are these state mandates for minimum minutes of daily instruction, and I'm really concerned that the way that this has been structured so far, the kids are just going to fall completely behind. I think if a class period is 80 minutes long, the student should stay engaged with the teacher during those 80 minutes. So obviously not lecturing that whole time, but there are a lot of strategies like, hey, we're going to do 20 minutes of direct instruction and then try these 3 math problems on your own for 15 minutes, and then we're going to circle back and talk it over and review and answer your questions. And those types of strategies are not being employed at my kid's school. And it's really frustrating. And so I think, what about all the kids who don't have someone at home to help them through that? I think a schedule as it's being applied with such a high degree of on your own assignments and such little live engagement really puts our at-risk students in danger of falling even farther behind. And I think this is a huge equity issue. And it's not just students that need that time engaged with teachers for those full 80-minute blocks. It's also parents who need that time so that they can work and they can help their other students. And so it's just super frustrating. And Santa Rosa students are already so behind after 3 years of power shutoffs and fires and smoke that they just need better. And I think it's just a shame. Other school districts nearby have a much more robust program with more minutes of engagement. If you can imagine being an Algebra 1 student and trying to get through
30 seconds.
If you can imagine being an Algebra 1 student and trying to get through that with just 2 meetings a week with maybe 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes in a week with a math teacher, it's just not enough. And these kids deserve so much better. So I would urge you to have daily meetings in math and language arts at the very minimum as you look to make changes now that we know we're going to be in distance learning for a much longer portion of the school year. These kids need math and language arts daily at a minimum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Micah Carlin Goldberg.
Good evening. My name is Micah Carlin Goldberg, formerly a 6th grade teacher at Steel Lane, and as of today, one of the district's new educational technology TOSAs, so I'm going to be supporting our other teachers throughout the district. We talk a lot about equity, but when I look at the requirements for my CSEA brethren, are people who are making hourly wages that are in some cases below the city minimum wage of $15 an hour, and looking at what they're being required to do with their jobs, it feels really inequitable to me. I totally understand that because Santa Rosa Teachers Association members have more job protections, we went a hardcore for safety to make sure our students and our staff and our families were safe. And CSEA, because they don't have those job protections, their MOU went hard for not losing people their jobs, which given the economy is a good thing. But why are we forcing CSEA members who could work from home to work from campus? We have CSE members whose job is to sit in front of a computer and talk to people, and we're forcing them to go into the school building and sit there in the school building while they do their jobs that could be done from home, the same as the teachers' jobs could be done from home, and in many cases are being done. We're not giving them a choice. They have a choice of go into work and get paid, or use their sick leave to stay home with their students. We have they don't have the option to bring their students into work with them if they're if they're working in a place where they're by themselves and could totally keep their students in the room. The same way teachers are being allowed to bring their students in and work with them in their room if they need to come and work on campus. The inequitable treatment between their certificated and the classified staff, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So while I know that contractually you can require them to come in and work from site, I would hope that you would have the flexibility and the lenience to give them the same courtesy that you're providing to the teachers of choosing to work from home if their job allows it, and choosing to bring their children into school in a safe way, the same as the teachers are being allowed to, if they're safe and if it's able to do that. So please do consider changing your policy of requiring on-campus work for your CSEA members who can work from home. For example, instructional assistants who can Zoom from home just as well as they can Zoom from the classroom that they're currently being forced to go into. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah.
Our next public comment is Emma Dunsmore.
Hello, my name is Emma Dunsmore, and up until yesterday, I was a first grade teacher at Brook Hill Elementary. Starting tomorrow, I will be a third grade teacher. On Thursday, August 13th, when I finally got my class list, I stayed up late writing individual postcards to each student because I believe in connection before content. This Monday, August 24th, we found out that one of our 2 first grade classes would be dissolved and the students would be divided between the remaining first grade class and a second grade class, creating a combo and shifting one of the first grade teachers to an open third grade position. I volunteered to make the move, canceling my remaining conferences for the day with little warning and unable to even tell parents why, because the change was not yet official. I prepared to say goodbye to my class in our Zoom meeting the following day and began wrapping my head around the challenge of teaching a new grade level by Thursday. Our students have been through so much. A pandemic is traumatic. A fire is traumatic. Changing teachers after bonds have been formed can be traumatic, especially on top of everything else our young students are dealing with. Yet, unlike the previously mentioned traumas, this one feels like it could have been prevented with better planning. I understand that enrollment is low and difficult decisions needed to be made. I strongly urge the board in the future to make these decisions before classes start. It would put our teachers in a position to be successful rather than scrambling to say goodbye to students and plan for a new grade in just days. More importantly, better planning could provide consistency to our students and their families, which they need and deserve now more than ever. Thank you.
Emma, thank you very much for all you do.
Next is Margaret Boone.
Sorry. Margaret Boone, I'm a teacher in the SBC ESN class at Montgomery. Last week when school started and we were informed, our instructional assistants in special ed were required to report to their regular campuses and classrooms to do their distance learning. Almost every teacher in our ESN protested this, but come Monday, our staff reported to school. At 6:20 this morning, I got a text from one of my assistants. A member of their family who is an essential worker was exposed to a coworker who tested positive for COVID. Now the family member has COVID, and my assistant has been exposed and is awaiting testing. In the meantime, my assistant has been working in a classroom with my other assistant, so that assistant has now been exposed as well. My assistant also went next door to get a tech tutorial from the teacher next door who has been coming in. That teacher has now potentially been exposed. That teacher works with two assistants who now have potentially been exposed. That teacher also met with a campus supervisor and another teacher, and they have potentially been exposed. Most of the teachers who work with these assistants never felt they should have been on campus to start. It felt reckless and unnecessary. I had planned to speak to this issue tonight before we even had this incident because I felt this was so unnecessary and unsafe. Now we have up to 7 families potentially exposed to COVID. Assistants and anyone who isn't needed on campus to perform their jobs shouldn't be on campus. We're in a pandemic and we shouldn't be risking people's lives unnecessarily. The district should reverse their stance on this and protect their employees instead of putting them at risk like this. Thank you.
Margaret, thank you.
Next is Judy Osborne Shaw.
Oh, I want to hear this.
Hi, I'm Judy Osborne Shaw. I'm also a special education teacher. I work at Ridgeway. And Micah and Margaret kind of stole my thunder. I'm bringing up the same thing about the assistants. I feel like it's a really inequitable situation. My assistants weren't aware before the start of school that they would have to work in the classroom by themselves. I'm working at home. They're not allowed to. So one of them is using up all her PN days and leaving me without an assistant. I know a couple of the assistants that are working there in an adjacent classroom. They are talking about how hard it is working there separated with masks, trying to not echo each other on Zoom, trying to get the students to understand them with masks on Zoom. And then yesterday, I think it was, a stranger was given access to their classroom, came in with no mask, unbeknownst to the site. They can't afford to take all their PN days to not show up there. They need that job. Our assistants are undercompensated as it is, and they are such valuable employees. My assistants, they do lesson planning, they've done instructional videos, they run groups, they contact students. They just have done so many things for my classroom, and I'm really feeling the loss. I really appreciated when Diane brought up in one of our meetings about doing things that make sense. And having the assistant sitting in an empty classroom doesn't make sense. We don't have materials that we need from there. They're exposed to more risk, like Margaret just explained, and they're left with the feeling that we don't trust them to do their jobs from home. So I'm just asking that you give them the respect. We're already short on assistants. There's a lot of openings for instructional assistants. Let's not lose the good ones that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
Next is Miss Karbowski. If you could please state your full name for the record before you comment.
Yes, my name is Pamela Karbowski, and I am a elementary PE teacher at Brook Hill and Biela. Good evening, Dr. Kitamura and members of the board. I just want to say, way to go, teachers. We are trying our best. You all rock. We are researching, we are building lessons, we are working overtime, numerous hours, all day, all week, all weekend, to try and learn how to be the best remote teacher we can be. This isn't easy. This isn't what we signed up for, but we know this is the given state of where we are at, and so we are about to rise to the occasion. So I just want to say Thank you to everyone who is being patient with us as teachers, as we figure out this new way of teaching. It is greatly appreciated, and we thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela.
And next is Robert Johns.
Hi, my name is Robert Johns. I'm a school psychologist with the district's preschool program. First, for those who do not know, our district does provide early start and special education services to students from birth all the way to age 5. Last spring, we passed out Chromebooks to our students who needed them and later found out that they could not log in as they were not given district emails. Technology stated that preschool students are too young for email and Chromebooks, so they asked us to go back and collect them from the families. We let technology know that we would need both emails and Chromebooks for our students for the 2020-2021 school year. Well, we are 2 weeks into the school year and we are still waiting with no word from technology. Technology has previously stated in writing that they do not believe that preschool students should get Chromebooks because they are too young. I'm asking that our preschool students have access to the same technology that all students have so they can get the services they need. I also wanted to mention that we were not given supplies like the rest of K-12. We were not thought of when that order was being placed, and we are quickly running out of all the basic supplies as we are also not given a regular supply budget as we do not have access to site funds. So I'm asking that special services or the district gives us permission to purchase these materials immediately and be able to get refunded for those purchases. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
And President Fong, there are no more hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for that feedback. Do we have a CSEA report tonight?
Yes, we do.
Hi. I was waiting for my picture to come up. It didn't, so okay. So hello? Oh, here I am. Okay. Okay, so I owe $5 because I muted and unmuted and then I lost the picture and it came back on. Hi. So I'm back. Our president, Betty Garcia, needed to focus on her family and her current education that she has been moving forward with. And so I am going to be finishing out her term, so you'll see me more again. And so for today, President Fong, school board members, Superintendent Kitamura, I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome all the new CSEA classified members who joined the district. We say goodbye to those who have decided to move on to other opportunities. Tonight, I'd like to thank the district and the school board for reconsidering the opportunity for, or not having the opportunity for our staff to bring their children to school if they needed to. And that is very appreciated. So now our members that will be considered for that opportunity started today. We continue and will continue to work with the district to solve issues regarding workplaces and anything else along the guidelines of safety that we can for our staff members. And we have been in communication with the district even up until today. So I look forward to the opportunity for all of us to come together for the education of our students. And thank you for this opportunity once again.
Well, welcome back, Tammy. And regards to Betty Garcia.
Yes, she's getting close. She's taking 2 or 3 classes, so it kind of got compounded for her with it being distance learning. Go figure.
So are you now the president, or you're just, she's still?
I was voted back in by the membership to finish out Betty's term, yes. So I will be with you at least until December of 2021. Or, yes, 2021.
All right, well.
Thank you.
And do we have an SRTA report tonight? President Will Lyon on deck. President Lyon, we can't hear you. But it doesn't look like.
I'm not unmuted. I'm going to call that a software error. Can I go 250? Is that fair? I don't know how, I don't know what the rules are. All right, $5. I'm up to 25. Hey, everybody. President Fong, Dr. Kitamura, members of the board. I'm William Lyon. I'm the president of Santa Rosa Teachers Association, representing about 900 of us, mostly teachers, but the counselors and the nurses and the speech pathologists, and all the certificated staff. I should open with thanking Pam Karbowski for her effervescent, positive attitude. She's right, the teachers are crushing it. And it's horrible. It's a contradiction. And there are just so many contradictions in COVID. But the teachers are putting I'd say every ounce they have, they're finding ounces of strength and energy they never knew they had to give every single thing they have for our students. And we all need to do better, and we all got to get better at it, and we all got to figure it out. It's COVID's fault. We are handling it. I have to say that it was a rough week for elementary teachers this week. It's not an admonishment, but I have to say that we had, I don't know what the final number is. I think it's going to end up being about 10 transfers. That is, you no longer work at the school that you feel at home at, you're going to go to this new school. And it feels, it's almost akin to, death isn't the right word, but divorce maybe. Like when you're at a school, it feels like a family. And when you're removed from that family, it's hard. And at the same time, every teacher that I'm aware of handled it like a champion, like a real pro. I saw teachers who were sad and crying for cause. This is hard. And they said, but I'm going to do it, and I'm going to give those new kids everything that I have. And those were some tough meetings, but I'm just so proud of all of those. It wasn't just tough on them. It's tough on every single one of their colleagues who are going to miss them. So that's not an admonishment. It's just recognizing that that was a hard week. Ridiculous. It's ridiculously hard that they would have to do that. And it's COVID. And they were great. So it's another one of those contradictions. And I will add that on the labor management side of it, it wasn't perfect. It was pretty good in terms of getting it right by the contract, working ahead of time to make sure that we agreed on gray area interpretations so that we could make it as smooth as possible for all of those members that were affected. And I think all of them were, because they knew it was coming, but they didn't know who, they didn't know which schools. So every teacher was on edge at the elementary level. But labor management side of it, we did everything we could to make it as smooth as possible. Another tough contradiction, but I'm proud of both sides. I'm proud of the teacher side, I'm proud of the admin side, and I'm deeply saddened and sorry for all the teachers and the students that are affected by it. A couple concerns that we have. First, I think it was 2 weeks ago. It feels like a couple months ago because time's weird now. But I wanted to thank Director Omar Medina for his apology about going fast on naming schools, and just thank the board in advance. It seems now, I mentioned it a couple months ago, we weren't quite there yet, but it really seems like now the board understands. We're doing 12-hour days. It takes 3 hours to take roll now on Wednesday for secondary teachers, right? Because they got to check 5 different platforms and everything's new. We're going to get better at it. But I just want to thank you all in advance for recognizing how hard everybody's working and making good decisions about, taking our time on things that could wait and making sure that when we do things, we have the space for it. So I appreciate that from the board, and it really meant a lot to me that Omar mentioned it. A couple concerns that I want to share, and again, it's not meant to be an admonishment, but I think the board needs to know that the teachers are really concerned about combos. Some of those shifts, I don't know if all of them did, but most of those shifts were because we dissolved the class, which created a combo at the elementary level. And the union position is clear. I'm not sure, I do hear some district officials talking about, oh, combos are a good thing, and it's looping, and it's multi-age. Looping and multi-age are good things. That's not what we're doing. We're doing combos. We have 2 sets of standards with 2 different grade levels, and the teacher's got to cover both of them. And in a COVID world, we were already truncating the number of standards we could cover. Now doing a combo in a COVID world, it's really tough on teachers. And it saves about $100,000. Contradictions everywhere. It's a good thing, it's a bad thing. What our ask is, we understand that it's a reality and that some of those have to happen. What our ask is that you do it judiciously, and that you only do it if you absolutely have to, and that you recognize those teachers are going to need extra support, and recognize that those students are not going to get the same high quality education that they would have got from the exact same teacher if it wasn't a combo. So that you only do it if you need to. On one level, our money for this year is based on last year's ADA. So we have enough money this year to staff the teachers that we need to avoid unnecessary combos. At the same time, COVID costs money. We have out years. Who knows what the economy is going to be? I'm not trying to shame anybody for being judicious with money. But if there's a tweener, and it could go either way, especially if we start picking kids up because they're late to the game because they didn't have an email, but now they're back in and some of our numbers start rising, we'd like to eliminate every single combo that we have. And we are not okay with saying, oh, it's a looping or it's a good thing, and it's not. It's a compromise, like all the compromises we're making. Last, I want to talk a little bit about our union siblings in CSEA. I want to echo, I think President Alfonso mentioned, there was a shift this week where now staff members are going to be allowed to bring their kids to school under certain conditions, and they're going to sign a waiver, but that's going to take a lot of pressure off of CSEA. And I should start with, the reason CSEA matters to us is because we can't do our job without them. So when we hear about and see and feel the pressures that they're getting that make it harder for them to do their job, or that would maybe encourage them to go find some other job or to leave our community because they can't afford to stay here, that kind of thing, that touches us personally because they're our colleagues and we love them, and it touches us professionally because we can't do our job without them. So the childcare thing, again, it's another example of, I talked last time about actions speak louder than words. I'm praising you for taking that action and taking care of those families on the CSEA side. I want to follow the many members that talked about we need to protect them, and that if they can do their job at home, and we understand they have a different contract, we understand that they negotiated, I'm not criticizing any of that, but on a personal human level, if they can do their job from home, we hope that you will let them do their job from home. And I'll let what the other members said stand on that. We also want to recognize that because they have, again, they negotiated differently. They have the right to negotiate. There are different parameters. I'm not criticizing any of that. But one of the things that are happening this week, we're hearing from our CSEA family is they're going to be, if their job isn't needed now in a COVID situation, they're going to be asked to take a new job classification. And if they choose not to take that, it could be that the only other option is to resign. So I'm not trying to criticize the bargaining that happened, but I just want to say that for the teachers and the union, when we hear that our colleagues are be given that choice, even if it was the right thing to do to give them that choice, that's really hard for us. And we hope that all of that will be done gently and that we will keep as many of them as we can, following our members who stated they're not easy to hire pre-COVID. And if we are perhaps going to come back in a hybrid model this year, nobody knows, we're going to need them. And if they all leave because they were given, the only choice given to them was leave or come into an environment that they don't feel safe or the job that they can't do, then we come back in, we're going to be in trouble. And perhaps the biggest barrier to that, I don't know which one's bigger, but it counts. We still have members, many of them who are going to be given that exact choice that I just stated, members of CSEA that are making $13.01 an hour when the minimum wage in every restaurant and every service industry job in Santa Rosa is $15 an hour. So if you add all those pressures up, childcare relieved one of those pressures, thank you. But those other pressures are going to add up that some of our members are going to say, I quit. They're not going to strike. In my experience, that's not where they're at. They quit, they go somewhere else, we lose them. So those are really serious concerns that I've heard from members. I know that you're aware of some of those on the cabinet level. I'm just like, and it's not even a clean ask. And I don't think that anything that you've done on any of those things are necessarily wrong. But if you can relieve some of that pressure from some of those members by getting done at the bargaining table on wages, working with them to find another job classification where they feel safe, letting them stay home if they can, it would mean a lot to CSEA, but it would also mean an awful lot to teachers. God bless you all for all the work we're doing. It is ridiculously hard, not because you're a bad person or I'm a bad person. It's COVID's fault. We're going to handle it. We're handling it. And I'm just so proud to be part of the work that we're doing, as messy as it is. Thank you all.
Thank you, President Lyon. We have a superintendent report now. Superintendent Kitamura.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here at the board meeting, those in the public. I'm going to start just by saying that the decisions that the board makes, the decisions that I make as your superintendent have been difficult over the years. In normal circumstances, they're difficult. But you add into what we have dealt with since October 2017, and it multiplies over and over and over again. In particular to this pandemic, the unpredictability of this situation that is so out of our control in so many ways has really been the challenge in making the decisions that we've had to make. Specifically, I'm going to speak to the prediction of enrollment and how almost impossible that has been during this time. And that we are using every piece of data point that we can, but ultimately we have to wait, we had to wait until our students actually showed up in school, the new way of showing up. And so I am fully aware, and it does hurt terribly when I hear the struggles of our classified staff and our teaching staff. You know, the transfers that had to take place because of over 300 students less at the elementary, 300 students. and what we would ultimately see when students began to show up. Now, I think I've shared that our attendance rate is 94%, which is a blessing. We just could not predict that those who would enroll and show up would be at the 94% level. That's amazing. But on the books, on the rosters, we are still below what we've projected for students. Over 100 when you total it all up, but in particular 300 at the elementary, which created the 8 transfers that occurred, 5 within school, their own school, and 3 out of school. And yes, it's difficult and it's hard. But again, as a district and looking at the entire big picture of how we, educate, how we provide, how we support, and how we keep the district fiscally sound are all the factors. And yes, President Line is correct. We get funds, we are funded off of last year's ADA, but remember last year's ADA was lower too on top of that. So we bring that forward. And we're deficit spending. So the responsibility that we have, and you as a board have, as the fiduciaries, the fiscal body of this district is, do you kick the can forward or do we chip away at that structural deficit in ways such that we don't have major layoffs or we don't have other ways that we're cutting back? We're not at this point having major cuts to programs, and I don't want that. I want a music program. I want an arts program. I want sports. I want all of those things for our students. And so right now we're making these tough choices. And so I just wanted to, address that and know that we do feel the pain and the hurt that does occur with some of these moves, but we couldn't make these decisions until we began to see who actually showed up in our schools. So with that, I will say to you that we projected 15,445 students for this school year. That's what we based our budget on. That's what we are looking at. 15,557. Sorry, that was our projected 15,557. Our actual is 15,445. So right now we are below 117 students overall. Okay. Yes, the elementary felt the biggest impact of transfers because that's where the largest amount of fewer students there are. The other thing that I want you as a board and the public to remember is that we're still enrolling students, so that's positive, but we're also still having students exit, okay? And we haven't dropped no-shows yet. That process will begin next week. That's gonna paint a little bit of a different picture, again, where we are being conservative in terms of additional hires and staffing some things. Now, I will also say that today in cabinet meeting, we have pushed forward with some hires going out to hire because we have greater than expected numbers who have enrolled at Piner, Comstock, and Cook. So there's good news in all of this as well. Some good news in all of this as well. So I did want to share that information with you and speak to a little bit of yes, that we recognize that this is difficult and this is hard. And we are happy that we were able to get legal counsel involved to finally give us our waivers for the staff to bring their children if there's available space. That's really good. And we're working through all the other things that have been brought up as well. So just that information. I want to switch gears to meal applications. And I know I've talked about meal applications every chance I get, but now I need the public and I need the board to help, because here's the data. Out of 707,493 that had meal applications last year. So 7,000, over 7,000 had meal applications last year. Right now to date, we only have 4,000 applications turned in. That is a huge gap. And so we have really got to put the word out, encourage, help to ensure that our families are getting meals. So that's another one that I wanted to share. I'm also really pleased. Assistant Superintendent Mazzara has been working so hard on child support care, child care, ACEs, programs in which students can go to on the off times of school, families to get support. So 54 students began at Biella and Monroe this week. This is through the Boys and Girls Club that we're doing this. They are cohorted in 12 students, 12 student groups. And so that's a positive. Where last week, Finley Center hosted 28 of our students. Next week, we'll be adding six potential classrooms. So that'd be 72 more students we can provide support for. The focus is going to be on children with disabilities, our EL students, foster youth, and homeless. That's going to be the first group that we support. And so I just wanted to pass that along. We're hoping to accommodate about 178 students. And so I think that's good news as well. And then let's see. The other one is Parent Square. So Parent Square, I just wanted to give you this piece of data on Parent Square. And I have created a board for the group, but nobody's responded to me. So I'm going to send it out again because we have a board group for Parent Square. And I'm going to try it again. And when you see my message come through, sign up and then let's interact that way. So Parent Square, we have 21,000 people signed to use it or authorized to use it. And we have 15,000 people looking, using, opening, clicking. So I think that's a pretty good rate. We're still sending out our newsletter through Parent Link, and we're still getting about a 28 to 30% open rate for both English and Spanish. So it appears to be that the Parent Square is a great tool. I think the board members who are both parents and board members can probably help us learn together how to navigate it and go through it. Okay, finally, my last thing is that I received a letter from Dr. Harrington, and I just want this to be on everybody's radar. And that is, there was a letter that came out August 19th from Dr. Mace and Dr. Harrington, both talking about taking a look at not returning to school in person until December for the first semester. It was very much a, we think you should think about this option, but today's letter is a little stronger, and it really is asking us to take a hard look at whether or not we're going to open for hybrid or continue in distance learning until for this first semester. So just as for the public and the board, I've already told this, but September 16th is a special board meeting where the board will be contemplating and making decisions about second quarter. And the reason that is September 16th is our quarter ends October 9th. And so whatever we decide, the board decides, we need some time to implement or communicate and get this information out. So that's what I have for you tonight. Thank you so much.
That is a lot.
Sorry.
And I'm sure there's more.
I cut it way down.
You did. Okay. I'm just going to give a very short report. I just want to give a shout out and an appreciation and gratitude. This is separate from what we've all been talking about up till now, to the Career Technical Education Foundation. This is a countywide group, and it's run by Kathy Goodacre. And there's a board, and it's a nonprofit. It's a foundation that helps career technical education, and it has helped Santa Rosa City Schools quite a bit. And I was invited to speak to their board, which was very interesting, and I was really honored to be able to speak to them. And what they're really about is they have really helped us because they have paid for many CTE courses at our schools over the many years, culinary, ag, green technology, construction. Also, they help with Pioneer internships. I think there possibly are 18 maybe, I'm not sure, kids that are going out to work, kind of a gap between high school and the next phase of life that the CTE Foundation is supporting. And they also supported us and are continuing to support us in Youth Truth, wherever that is right now in COVID times. So I want to thank them for their work. But what's really interesting to me is that they're responding to the times, and they are pivoting, and they are listening, and they are asking questions about what kids need, what the economy needs, what teachers need, what we all need in order to best prepare our youth for success as adults. And they know that what they've done in the past was good in the past, but I guess the word right now is pivot. How can they change up? So I really appreciate them for constantly responding to current events and what's happening now. We are all doing that. I know we are. So thank you to the CTE Foundation. Other board members, you have reports tonight. Can you show me by a raise of your hands? Okay, so let's start with Director Lopez, and then Director Medina, Director De La Cruz is what I saw so far right now.
And then I believe also Director Close wanted to do a... Okay, thank you, President Fong. So I wanted to report I was able to meet with Rachel from the Sonoma County Library, and we talked about the One Card program with the district, and that's something that I hope to be able to work with them, just making sure our students and families know about it, especially right now during this time, so that they can access resources. I'm in contact with a lot of the ASB classes, and one of the things I've heard a lot about is doing voter registration drives, especially with the election around the corner. And so that's something that I hope that I will be able to work with them on. And then thirdly, obviously, since classes have gone into session, I've heard a lot of feedback from our students. And so something that I was hoping that we could do is maybe think about putting out a student feedback survey just to see how things are going regarding distance learning.
$5. Thank you. Director Medina.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to first off thank Dr. Kitamura for your extensive report and for all the work. And I really wanted to take a moment to thank all the teachers for all the hard work that you're putting in. It's really appreciated. I know that because of the enrollment, we've had some difficult decisions to make, and you know, I think I'm sorry for all of those that have had to go through some difficult processes. But thank you for being professionals and in the work that you do. Ultimately, our students are going to benefit from your efforts. I did also just want to touch base on our classified staff. I think, you know, my mom was a custodian, and so knowing that classified staff are very critical to the work that everybody does at our schools, that our teachers require them for support, but ultimately they're oftentimes, I want to say, less attention is paid to them. But I think that it's really important that we acknowledge and recognize how important they are to our district. And I do ask that we also consider their safety. If we can minimize risk, if there is situations where they don't have to be on campus. In the work that I do, I'm consistently seeing week after week an increase in people being infected with COVID, and anything that we can do to minimize risk, I think is really critical from our perspective. I don't want to see anyone infected. I know very personally the impact it has on people, on a family, and I don't want that for anybody. So anything that we can do, I would ask that the district do whatever is possible. And in relation to Superintendent Steve Harrington's letter and Dr. Mace, and seeing everything that I'm seeing, you know, I'm comfortable with moving towards keeping our current situation towards December. And if we're able to decide that sooner, I'd love to have that discussion sooner. But I'm comfortable waiting until September 16th, just so that everybody can be prepared to know what's ahead, and so that we don't have that looming over us as something that's coming, so that we could be ready to know what we're going to be doing, and everybody's just on that same level. Because I think some sort of sense of consistency in this abnormal era is something that we need. So let's just move forward. So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Medina. Director De La Cruz.
Thank you, President Fong. Joining my voice to thank teachers and staff. I also wanted to thank parents who are doing just amazing things to support their kids, to be graceful with the challenges that are all around us, who I know are trying to also work full time. Some of them are teachers, some of them are staff. Thank you. I can't imagine what that's like. And I just want to thank so many parents for being patient and for being graceful and for being flexible and for continuing to carry so much of the weight, and to share it with us. I want to also kind of raise my voice in the mea culpa side of the I made a comment about needing to change the name of Luther Burbank Elementary, and I want to, as an elected official, really make sure that we're looking at what our priorities are right now. And to me, furthering equity and making sure that we're having community conversations and doing deep learning and deep teaching about our histories and about the ways in which those histories challenge our understanding and make us grow and make us understand how different people can feel by seeing different things and hearing different names and understanding the connection between those names and our histories of oppression and genocide and eugenics, and all of those things do also not mean that we need to make that a priority right now, changing that name and putting together a committee for name changes and all of the churn that and all of the additional kind of stress and work that is put on staff during this time. I just want to acknowledge that, and I want us to set some priorities. And so for me, in thinking through how we continue to move forward as a community to really engage with these choices that we have in front of us right now feels like, let's challenge ourselves to do some deep teaching and some deep learning around these names, and let's give ourselves a little bit of a break and know that right now pulling together a huge community engagement effort to have people weigh in on a name change may not be the most kind of highest priority in the middle of COVID and early wildfire season and everything else that people have on their plates right now. And I just really want to thank the teachers and staff who reached out to make this ask and to recognize the ways in which I really heard the ask be about, we are champions for equity with you. And we hear the intent and we hear the need and we hear, the desire for us to really engage in a deep conversation. Can you let us do that? And maybe not try to do this big, deep community engagement push to change a name that, be what it may, is something that we're holding on to right now as a community, as the Luther Burbank community of, the school community of Burbank. And so I just want to thank teachers for reaching out and for raising those issues. And I want to let you know that I hear you and that I share the concern about really making clear what our priorities are right now. And that is, you know, surviving and thriving in very, very challenging circumstances. And I'm grateful to your continued dedication to championing equity, to championing an anti-racist institution, and knowing that there are many ways that we can do that, and changing names may not be the most important way that we can do that right now. Adelante. Thank you.
Thank you, Director De La Cruz. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. Director Close.
Thank you, President Fong. First, I want to just thank Director De La Cruz for those comments and for that perspective. This is it's a tricky situation, and it's important that we prioritize. And I think that's really the right perspective right now, and such an opportunity for teachers to teach in the way that they do. And so it's a great opportunity. I know that there's gonna be a lot of repetition tonight from all of us, but I think we all just feel really compelled to thank our school communities at every level for really rising to the challenge, to the moment before us, because it is, it's tough. And I first want to just say to Ms. Garcia, former President Garcia of CSEA, good luck in your studies, and that must have been a hard thing to step down, and you are doing a great job in your new tenure, and thank you, President Afonso, for stepping up. President Afonso, you have had an amazing run of service, and your commitment to that is admirable. So I always appreciate your attitude and work, so welcome back. I had a parent say to me, and at first I didn't know if she was serious, that it seems like teachers aren't doing very much right now. Because, you know, parents seem to be doing all the work, and teachers are just on Zoom for a little bit. And I know a lot of teachers, some very close to me, and saw what their summers were like. And I also see what their days are like to some degree. And I just want to assure parents who are working their tails off in a way that I cannot even imagine, that teachers are doing the exact same thing, and sometimes doing that and doing what you're doing, which is teaching their own children at home. And I'll give you just a little example of, I had to record an 8-minute video for Leadership Santa Rosa yesterday for my job, and on Zoom. And it's a spiel I do all the time, and I use Zoom all the time. But to do this 8-minute video in a way that was going to be a quality product, it took me 2.5 hours. It took me 2.5 hours. I had to keep going back. There kept being interruptions. There's interruptions from a dog. There's interruptions from the garbage truck. There were me screwing up. The first one was 12 minutes, had to be 8 minutes, came back. The next one was 9 minutes. It was really hard. And so just this whole Zoom thing, there's nothing that happens in real time right here. It looks like it's real time, but it's really not. It's deceptive. And to the extent that it looks like it's real time, that means they're doing a bang up job, and they're doing a ton of preparation. And the other thing is that they're learning all this new stuff. They learn a new platform. And then in between learning the new platform, you know, on the PD day, and then administering it to their classroom, operationalizing it, there's all this preparation time in between. And so I'd kind of ask you to think about the instruction you were given, like as a college student, where they said for every hour of class, you're going to do 3 hours of homework. And I think it's kind of like that. Like for every hour that teachers are actually doing their work, there's probably 3 hours of prep work and after work. And so, so for all of you who think they're not working too hard, they're working way harder than you think, and they're pros. And so maybe they're making it look easy. Maybe that's the thing, is that they're just really good at it. But to all of you parents, you're doing amazing things too. I mean, just to echo what everybody's saying, in this pandemic, everybody is stepping up, but it's not easy for anyone. You know, one of the things that I think that we need to ask of all of us, we need to ask of each other is a little bit of grace, or a lot of it. Allow each other some humanity and some mistakes and some and works in progress and periods of growth. and also allowing us to be just not quite as good as sometimes we are. Sometimes our best is just not that great. That's what I like to say. I'm doing my best. It's just not that great today. So that's kind of how it is right now. The other thing is that I think we need to ask is that everyone everybody think out of the box and everybody be bold in bringing their ideas to the district. Teachers, parents, students, classified members, everybody who has an idea, who might make this a little better or a little easier, please bring those ideas, send them to us, because this is all new to everybody. And we could use all the good ideas and all the help. We are definitely all in this together and working together to make it better. And then the last thing is that I don't know about you, but I have witnessed people, perhaps even myself, having sometimes a shorter fuse in this pandemic. And I think that everyone is having a lot of stress on them. They're doing more than usual at work. They're doing more than usual at home. And now not only do we have the pandemic, but we have fires, perhaps more fires. Hopefully not. Hopefully we got it done early. But again, I think allowing each other a little grace is in order. And I'd also really like to call on the district to look at what we can do to support our staffs and our families and our kids' mental health, even more than we usually do. I know that for our district, it's a priority more than for most, but even now being a little bit more creative about how we do that. And I think back to when, after Andy Lopez was killed, how we really worked hard to have restorative circles as much as we could possibly have them. I don't know if that's the answer. I know the Center for Mind Body Medicine and post fires, they trained a lot of people to do mindfulness training. If we reach out to that group and ask for their support, I know they do some work with us, but maybe more. I don't know what the answer is, but I think we need to recognize that this is a strain on everybody's mental health and try to figure out how to relieve some of that strain. Thank you all for everything you're all doing.
Thank you, Director Close. Director Sheffield, Director McCormick.
I will just keep my comments really brief because it's so much has already been said. I agree with all of my colleagues on the board. The teachers, the staff really are crushing it, as Will says. They are last week and going into this week. I was so stressed and so worried a week and a half ago, wondering what Monday would be like. And I was excited for my kids that they would be able to see their classmates again, to be able to see their teachers. And Monday morning came around and they were so excited and logged in and they were so focused because I think that the teachers set the tone from the very beginning. And just how much I appreciate that. And then, so what I wanted to say was, again, calling on the district to be as understanding and accommodating as the rest of, all of us in our lives, the whole country, the whole world really around what this pandemic means. We do have to be creative around the ways that we're thinking. I'm going to talk a little bit more later in the agenda on attendance and some concerns that I have around that. But, again, not to say much of what has already been said, but we're all learning in this process. And we just need to just understand that. Parents, absolutely. Parents are learning this in the process too. And for all of the hiccups and road bumps that we had last week, speaking from, as a parent to parents, I think that for the most part, we can all agree that all things considered, we did a pretty good job, and so I just want to, applaud the district. I want to applaud the teachers and staff for a good production so far. Yeah, there are challenges ahead, but we're in the pandemic. Everything is out the window. Expectations are gone. So just as long as we're running on that assumption, we're doing a pretty good job. So thank you all.
Thank you, Director Sheffield. Director McCormick.
I just want to echo everything everyone said and just say out loud again, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're an educator in any piece of education, classified, administrator, faculty, parent, student, if you're anywhere in there, you know, this is an act of service that you've chosen to begin with, but the level of what is being required of you now is, this is a whole different ball game. Paradigm's been flipped upside down. Rule book's been thrown out the window. So I just want to say thank you and really appreciate where everybody's at right now. And I think we can all really feel that. And I just want to encourage everybody to keep finding a way to connect. Connect with your students. Students, work hard to connect with your teachers. Parents, connect with other parents. You know, other teachers connect with other teachers. Personally, as a teacher right now, it gets really lonely when you get down into the weeds of trying to figure out how to make sense of this for yourself and for your classes and your students right now. So I just encourage everyone to keep reaching out and keep connecting. And yeah, thank you for the service everybody's putting into this.
Thank you, Director McCormick. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you. We are going to take a few minutes to do an interpreter change right now. So just a minute or two. Adina?
Yes, thanks, Lori.
I'm back. Thank you.
We're all set, thank you.
Thank you, interpreters. That would be Dan, and I think it's Marcella. Is that right? Okay. Thank you so much, interpreters. All right. We're moving on to our discussion action item. Oh, do we have a CSBA report, Director Close? No. All right. We're moving on to the EAT items, discussion action items. We're going to start with agenda item 1. It's an action item. It's the approval of resolution recognizing September as Attendance Awareness Month. Dr. Kitamura.
Thank you. I'm actually going to turn this right over to Assistant Superintendent Mazzara because attendance is under his wheelhouse. And so Assistant Superintendent Mazzara, pass it to you.
$15. I got it. Sorry, guys. Thank you, President Fong, board members, and Dr. Kitamura. Attendance is a national recognition day for attendance, and it's the start of the school year, the importance of attendance. But what makes this year and this year's resolution more important is not just the focus on attendance. The new reality of where we are under the pandemic is actually a focus on re-engagement. And I just want to kind of talk to you, that's the shift that we've done. We have done a lot in the last 3 years. We're just coming off a 3-year grant. We called it the SAIL grant, if you recall. School Attendance Improves Learning, headed by Director Patty Turner. And we did a lot of great work in there in preparing our systems and getting systems ready and getting people understanding systems. And we activated that system in the spring when we had to connect with students and start that process of who was not receiving technology, who was not coming online. And we did a day-by-day, person-by-person phone call list that we really used effectively. So that process and the system that we had, we're tapping into already. So a couple of quick numbers, although Dr. Kitamura mentioned we're at a 94% attendance rate, which is amazing. What's perhaps even more amazing is we had about 880 students in the first 2 days that were reported being absent. By day 3, we had contacted 742 of those students. So that is literally we're kind of gearing up with everyone, all hands on deck, making phone calls, going through that, logging them, finding out what's going on, why your technology glitch is happening, referring them, just an amazing host of work that's going on. And that's really the focus that we hope to put into attendance in the month of September, is keeping kids engaged, keeping our system involved. And that engagement is developing a record of engagement. That's another new state requirement that you'll be hearing more about in our continuity and learning plan. And we've been really proactive about it. We've been bringing on SRTA, CSEA to try to help us describe what this is. And of course, these rules aren't really out there. There's a template that was just published a couple days ago, but they're leaving everything up to us. And so we have a lot of work to do as we really tune this in. But I got to tell you, the work that we've done before on this has really given us a good place. And so with that, I turn it back to the board for our resolution in attendance for September.
Oh my God. I think that cost me $20 right there.
With grace, President Fong.
That's just dead air, that's all. It happens on the radio all the time.
So we have an action item before us. Do we have any questions, clarifying questions for Assistant Superintendent Mazira? And that would be Director Sheffield.
So, I definitely, approve the resolution recognizing Attendance Month, but I had some questions around moving forward and how, we are going to be doing attendance. I know we're still trying to figure out a few things, but I had, when I talked about conversations that I had with parents over the last couple,
Excuse me, Director Sheffield, are these just like clarifying questions?
These are clarifying questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clarifying questions. I'm hoping that the way that we're doing attendance isn't running off of a lot of assumptions that maybe every general person has. We're taking attendance a specific way. We're trying to capture everybody, but I'm hoping that we're not, and maybe you can clarify, Steve, that we're not making the assumptions that, students are at home, that they're not in a parking lot or a car working, from their parents' work, that they're not at a grandparent's house. Grandparents have limited technology skills, that they have a secure Wi-Fi link if they're working from their parents' work, that if they get dropped off of a Zoom meeting, that they're not frozen out, that they're not locked out, and that they miss that attendance spot. That they're not taking care of a younger sibling, trying to log them in, that they might be late logging into a Zoom meeting because their Zoom time corresponds with their own Zoom time. So these are the issues that I heard from parents, all of these issues this week. And so I want to make sure that we're not assuming that every student has the ability to take the time to do this. And then the host of, issues around, parents working and parent schedule to be able to direct them, especially the younger kids, through the process.
Yeah, one of the things that we worked on with in the negotiated MOU is around the idea of a live daily interaction and an engaging process. Students have both synchronous and asynchronous ability to log in. There is supposed to be a respect for the scheduling, the glitches that come up in these lives that you described, I think, very well, Mr. Sheffield. So participation and attendance can be done other than just synchronously. Logging on, here's my screen from 9:05 to 9:45. There can be more than that in participation. And it's a learning process that we're all going through. I think one of the strengths that I previously identified is the fact that we're going to connect to that student and find out what happened. So that's kind of the piece. So if that student gets marked absent, we're trying to find out what's going on, what's the connection, how can we help, inform the teacher. In this attendance process, teachers have until the next day to submit their attendance. So as my Monday attendance, they have all the way up until that next day to look at the work that might have been turned in on the attendance. So the way we're designing it is, Steve was not able to come in during my window, but he was able to do the assignment and turn that into the teacher. Teacher has to look at that, give credit, so that's attendance for that day. So that is a system that we're developing. Students have flexibility of a longer day. Teachers have a longer flexibility to show that work. It's frustrating because we don't have attendance coming in at the regular times. 3 o'clock, I can't run an attendance report. So we're catching up to those systems.
So you had said that that somebody is contacting the student or the family to find out who's making that contact. I don't want to have additional burden put on the teacher to have to do that.
No, that's kind of the re-engagement strategy and team that we've worked with. So that's using our restorative specialists, our family engagements, our student advisors, our campus supervisors, sometimes a noon duty person, all those primarily classified support staff. And that's how they are engaging and supporting distance learning. If they can't be on the Zoom call and help the teacher, they're in the back end of this trying to support the students that aren't having access.
Okay. This is great. And the reason why I wanted to bring it up in this section was because there are a lot of confused parents out there who are panicking and saying, you know what, my kid couldn't get back into a Zoom, I dropped off and did not get attendance that day. What do I do?
Right.
Who do I contact? But if somebody's reaching out to them, or if they can, I don't know, if it's whatever is appropriate to send a message to the teacher to say, hey, you know, my daughter was with me at the construction site and we couldn't get a connection. So, okay.
Yeah, and I was going to say one of the wonderful things about that re-engagement is that conversation with an employee counts as live interaction. So for a restorative to follow up and find out what's going on, that can count as attendance because you are connecting and have an interaction, a meaningful interaction with an employee on campus. So that's a way to gather back attendance.
It's counted as participation.
So then, you know, in some of these instances where there is a follow-up that is a required assignment at the end of the class to make sure to demonstrate that there was attendance, right? These are, you know, how is that something that's made up? Because the student wants to do the assignment. Maybe they're not getting that, you know, check on the attendance until after the fact, until it's all corrected, but they still want to do that assignment, making sure that they're not shut out of that.
Go ahead.
It's in their Google Classroom. The assignments are there in their Google Classroom.
I'm talking, right, Superintendent, I'm talking about the attendance assignments.
Yeah, those are in, that's the same thing. It's in their, it counts as their attendance. So if the call should drop off, whatever assignments the teacher assigned, when they do them and turn them in, that's verification of their attendance as well.
Just hoping that this is made clear to parents who are facing these issues.
Well, I think that there's work to do, and I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you there is work to do, because when we talked about the data around attendance, when I look at, and you were 94.23%, okay, that's great. We have schools with as low as
0.2, I think I saw.
Yeah, 2% or 0.78, 0.68. So 99.2% attendance. On the flip side, we have schools that are 10%, 90%, 85% attendance.
Right.
And so let me tell you what schools those are and where the resources must be focused. Lincoln, Burbank, Monroe, right? And then Elsie Allen High School. The middle schools did all low. Their middle schools are all low. So we know, and Ridgeway, we know that the contact is going to be different. It needs to be different for those schools. We got to dig in and find out what is going on.
Okay, so the instances that I provided, 3 of the schools that you mentioned, that's where they're coming from. So we know the demographic and we know the reason, because the circumstances that I gave are real life instances that we're all dealing with COVID collectively. And I'm just saying that there needs to be some kind of grace or understanding or accommodation for these instances, and probably, 100 more that, we haven't even thought of.
Well, yeah.
And I just wanted to bring that to the attention to make sure that, as we move forward, and again, this is all a learning process, that we are making the accommodations for these. I think about my employer and how fortunate I am that I'm allowed to work from home and be able to supervise my kids as they're logging on, for their Zoom meetings, and to make sure that their attendance is on. My work made that accommodation, and I know other employers are making these accommodations for their employees. I just want to make sure that we're making the accommodations for the students.
Yeah.
Well, and of course our employees as well, but for our students, because, I think that I'm hoping that we're not leaving them out. I mean, just as much as we adults, working parents, adults are impacted by COVID, so are the kids, and their home life and their situations are impacted. Everywhere I go, I have to take my boys with me, and I have to make some sort of weird, strange accommodation, right? And I have it good. I'm not even complaining. I'm just bringing attention to the issues that were brought up to me just in the past week and a half. So thank you.
Thank you for bringing those real life examples to what we're seeing, I think, in the data.
Director De La Cruz, you had a question?
No, I'm good. I'm just flailing over here trying to.
Director Medina, question?
Yeah. Well, I guess first I'll preface it by saying attendance, I think, is critical to educational outcomes, and those educational outcomes are critical towards decreasing our school to prison pipeline, big picture, right? And given the context of everything with SROs and where the city invests their money, one of the things that has been discussed before has been like the city investing money in mental health workers for a variety of issues. But if we were to ask the city to invest their money in a different way, do you think that investing in social workers might be a better way to address some of the barriers to attendance that you find families having, in the interactions that you're discovering as people aren't attending school? Do you think that might be a better investment or to assist in helping families meet these barriers?
Social workers are a strong connection to the neighborhood and services. We have a social worker that we brought on to our social emotional staff as a balance to try to find that connection. Our family engagements do a wonderful job, but it's just not the same kind of depth that a social worker can provide. We certainly recognize the need and improvement of that. Years ago, we've been trying to talk about on-campus community centers and having more social workers. We absolutely would support social workers and access to, either through community services partnering with. So we do believe social workers can provide a very important nexus for families that are struggling and having access to the community and getting resources. Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question also, Assistant Superintendent Mazira. SAIL has ended. Can you was it grant driven? What happened?
It was a 3-year grant driven to improve chronic absenteeism from the state. Chronic absenteeism came out as an emphasis 3 years ago under the dashboard and the way they were going to try to focus on that. And we dug very deeply into that. We certainly improved our rates at an overall level, but in the last year, and we presented some of this data last time in December, January, is that we were really breaking down the nuances of our chronic absenteeism by school, by demographic, and really digging into some of the pockets of our data, which was really helpful us, and kind of, again, develop these systems and programs that we are kind of maximizing now. So it was very helpful, but like other things, I think budgetarily, things kind of dried up in that world and are shifting in other pandemic kind of areas.
All right, at this point, I'm going to take public discussion, public comment on this item. Moderator, do we have any public comments?
So to officially call for public comment, this is item E1. If you'd like to comment, please raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. And for phone callers, you can raise your hand by pushing *9 for item E1. And there are no hands raised.
All right, this is an action item. Do we have any other discussion? I'm calling for discussion. Director Manieri.
Yeah, I really want to lift up the question that Director Medina raised around extra supports and possibly social workers being a part of this process. I would also recommend or at least put on the radar of the superintendent and the SAFE team community health workers who are also trained to do that kind of work and maybe easier to find in our community and also to employ. And I know that I'm very connected with the network of community health workers, and I know that there is a really big need for employment. So I might be a good way to get them involved and to make sure that we're doing this in the whole process of attendance and making sure that we know the needs of our students, that it's done in a culturally appropriate way, so that, you know, families are also receiving services that they need and are being referred to fulfill any needs that might be, you know, they might be experiencing right now.
Great. I love that idea. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Director Lopez.
So going back to Director Sheffield's question earlier, we were talking about how there's a lot of flexibility with, you know, attendance and how that is. Have we communicated that to students? No, obviously we want students to be in class if they're able to, but if they're not able to do so, they might not know that there is flexibility. And so just making sure that they are aware about that.
You know, I think that as Dr. Kimura mentioned, that's kind of a work in progress. We are all adjusting to it. We are doing professional development every week now with teachers, and that's one of the things we are wrestling with. What is that live, meaningful interaction? How to do that? You know, teachers are kind of understanding that. So I think that message probably is not as clear as it is now that we hope it to be in 30 days as we work first with our teachers so they can understand what that looks like, how to create assignments for that, how to develop that flexibility in our system. So I certainly know that we're going to have to do better on getting that messaging out, and that'll be a strong piece of it. We have to make sure the teachers are ready for it and can explain it when it comes to them, of course, in a classroom setting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to say this in terms of engagement and attendance. I'm in, of course, support of this attendance resolution because we know that teachers say that once we get the kid in class, we can work our magic with the child, with the student. It's when they're not there. But I think I have to challenge ourselves. I mean, our whole system, the entire educational system, and I know that everyone is working very hard right now on all different platforms. But if we're talking re-engagement, we are talking how, you've heard me say this so many times, how do we do school that is creating the barriers for some kids not to be engaged? And so this isn't just your office, Steve, in terms of, you know, student services. It's everyone. It's teaching and learning. It's everything. And so if we're talking pivot time and Learning House, for example, how do we pivot to engage or to re-engage those students for whom school doesn't work, however that is, in all the different ways it doesn't work. And it's not because teachers aren't doing a good job. It's because the system that we work under, that we're forced to work under, that is decades long, right? 100 years old, is only a certain way. So that's what I'm interested in. That's what, you know, where we live in policy, but that's where we need to go to keep engaging all the different kinds of kids and all the different kinds of styles that we're talking about. So my 2 cents, and I'm going to elevate it to 5 cents. All right, this is an action item. Do I have a call for it? Was that a hand by Director McCormick?
Yeah, I would like to move to the approval of resolution recognizing September as Attendance Awareness month.
I'll second.
I was paying attention to the screen. I saw it all. All right. So this is, it was moved by Director McCormick and seconded by Director Sheffield. Dina, may we have that roll call vote, please?
Director Lopez.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Close.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye. Thank you. That passes. September is Attendance Awareness Month, but of course it's all year long. Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Mazera. We're moving on. Oh, we are going to take a short break. So we'll take a 5-minute break, which I also know goes into like an 8-minute break, but let's go for 5. We'll see you in 5. Yes, good. All right. Thank you, everybody. We're moving on to item E2. This is discussion. Attendance boundary adjustment process. Diane.
Thank you. President Fong, for the sake of haiku, one of my all-time favorite words besides pivot, I'm going to turn this over to Deputy Superintendent Edson.
Good evening, President Fong, members of the board, Superintendent Kitamura. Tonight, we are going to talk about the boundary adjustment process. Joining me tonight is Milton Foster, legal representative from F3, and Larry Furchaw from Cooperative Strategies, who leads the demographic and boundary redrawing efforts on behalf of the school district. We're bringing this tonight as a discussion item to give an overview of the process that we'll be going through. As you may recall, as we talked about the combination of CCLA and Cook Middle School, turning that site into a single K-8 charter school, there would be the need to redraw boundaries for our neighborhood middle schools. Through that process, we would be creating what we have, or changing what we have now of 5 traditional middle schools with feeder patterns to 5 traditional high schools. With the absorption, if you will, of Cook into CCLA to create a K-8 charter, we now create an environment with 4 traditional middle schools feeding 5 traditional high schools. So with that, we have a presentation tonight that Mr. Furchaw will go over, talking about the process that we're going to take over the course of the next several months in preparation for bringing recommendations back to the board for discussion, as well as bringing a final plan for consideration in December or January of 2021. With that, I'm going to pull up the slide deck. And I will turn it over to Mr. Furchaw.
Thank you, Rick, and members of the board, Dr. Kitamura, and I was really paranoid about not hitting the unmute button, so I'm glad I don't move $5. Just have this brief presentation to walk through. We can go ahead and go to the next slide already, Rick. Really just outlining, it's a pretty brief presentation, but as Mr. Edson laid out, what is the purpose of this process? Why are we doing it? What is the proposed timeline? What are the committees that we're going to have through this process? And what are the criteria that we're going to use as we look at redrawing the attendance boundaries? So we can go to the next slide. As Mr. Edson laid out, there's the 2 drivers of the conversion of Cook Middle School to CCLA and the need to have neighborhood boundary schools at the middle school level, and the change in the feeder patterns, and also an opportunity to look at the balance across the schools in terms of enrollment. I thought when I looked at balance as kind of our graphic, I thought this is kind of a Zen moment here with these rocks nicely balanced. And this is the opposite of what an attendance boundary process looks like. There's not as much zen as we would like, unfortunately. So enjoy this moment of zen in this process. We can go to the next slide then in terms of what the current middle school attendance boundaries look like. And they look exactly the same at the high school level, but you can see Cook is yellow, Slater is green, Santa Rosa Middle School is purple there in the center, Rincon Valley is blue, and Comstock is red over on the west side. And then we just flip the chart there, and the names change, but the colors stay the same, and the school sites move slightly. So we can see we have coterminous boundaries from the middle school to the high school level, and when we change this to having 4 boundaries at the middle school to 5 boundaries at the high school level, there will be changes in feeder patterns, and we're going to look at that through this process. So we can go to the next slide and just talk about what that process looks like. And from our starting point now in September through December and January, kind of flexible there on whether it's December or January. But the idea to wrap this process up so that we have a decision in terms of what the boundaries will look like in time for folks to know and make decisions about where their students will attend school next year. So we have what's known as a core group, which we'll talk about who makes up the core group, but it really is supposed to have a district-wide perspective. It's composed of the cabinet, district cabinet, plus some additional staff folks who can bring perspective and information to the process. So we'll meet in September with that group to review the enrollment information, review some potential or preliminary boundary scenarios, get feedback, create some additional scenarios. The goal to kind of have something to prepared with some informed decision or informed process prior to meeting with the boundary committee, because while I've been to the district a few times, I'm hardly a local. And so before I bring our outsider perspective maps to the community, it's helpful in the committee, it's helpful to have that perspective from the district before we could meet with the boundary committee for the first time, which we also tentatively planned for September. In that first meeting, we review the process, the considerations, the enrollment information, and then look at the scenarios that we've developed, get ideas for additional scenarios. That would also happen again at the second meeting of the boundary committee. We would review any new scenarios, get input, get recommendations on additional scenarios to look at, and then a third meeting potentially to keep refining down what it is that makes the most sense to the group that we've assembled. The idea is that we would have finalized the recommendations from the boundary committee at that third meeting. If it needs another meeting, we can work in another meeting, of course, and then meet with the core group again just to talk through and prepare to share that with the board in November. So we would sunshine that proposal or that recommendation to the board, seek any feedback from the board, and before holding a series of community input meetings in November is what we have targeted here. And these would be, we're not sure exactly the number of those yet. It'll probably depend upon the proposal that comes from the boundary committee in terms of how many meetings we have to have depending on the scope of the changes that are being recommended. So we will schedule those when we're a little bit closer and have a sense of how many meetings we'll need and where those will need to occur. After we collect all the feedback from those community input meetings, we'll meet back with the core group again, review that feedback, see if there's any changes that we want to discuss making to the proposal. We need to meet with the boundary committee again. Of course, we can build that in. But the goal is to get back to the board with a recommendation of a final plan by either December or January of 2021. So that's kind of the roadmap we have there. On the next slide, you can look at who makes up the committee. And you can see we have highlighted off to the right-hand side, the core group members. So superintendent, deputy superintendent, 3 assistant superintendents. We've also included the director of elementary curriculum, director of student and family engagement, the director of data and assessment, as well as the executive assistant to the board and the superintendent are part of the core group. And then they're also part of the full committee, which would also include principals from each of the middle and high schools, a parent representative from each of the middle and high schools, the student board member, as well as one additional student representative, and then 2 representatives from the Teachers Association and 2 representatives from CSEA. So you can see we have a cross-section representation from all the schools within the district, all the communities within the district to provide feedback through this process. The idea that we also balance that with the district level folks to have that district-wide perspective on this process. And then on the next slide, we're just going to summarize here Board Policy 5116, which deals with attendance boundaries and the criteria. So you can see that the board shall establish attendance boundaries in order to maximize the efficient use of facilities and effective administration of schools, and that these are periodically reviewed and recommendations are made to the board for boundary adjustments. Next slide. And these are the criteria that are outlined in Board Policy 5116. They are not in any order of importance. They are just how they were written in board policy. If there is any criteria from board discussion that you would like to make sure is elevated through this process, if there is any charge to the committee that you'd like to articulate through that discussion, certainly that would be helpful. But you can see school enrollment data, including patterns of enrollment increase or decrease, facilities capacity, growth that may occur because of development, feeder patterns, and trying to maintain where possible the continuity of student attendance, any federal, state, or court mandates. Community input obviously is important, student safety, transportation, community and neighborhood identity. I won't keep reading all of them, but these are all the factors that go into it. And as the board discusses this process, certainly if there's any of those that you want us to pay closer attention to, any directions that you'd like to give to the committee, certainly we can take that as through this process. And with that, that wraps up the presentation, and certainly be available to answer any questions.
All right, so let's see. This is the discussion item, and what questions do we have from the board before we take public comment? I see Director Manieri, Director Medina. Go ahead, Director Manieri.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. The timeline seems really short, and I'm wondering if this is normal. Like, is this normal practice that it be this short, that we be receiving recommendations in December, as early as December and possibly January?
Yeah, the process can either be the length that we've outlined here, or it could be about a year plus longer. That's kind of how this timeline has to work in order to have recommendations done in time for next school year. So had we started the process about a year ago, that would have allowed for that additional time, but because we want to make sure this process is done for next school year, that really does dictate it. And it is pretty common that we do have to go through this process pretty quickly, because you also want to make sure we have up-to-date enrollment information, especially with all the changes that we've been seeing in the district with enrollment patterns. And so, you know, when we get a new school year's worth of enrollment data right about now, that helps inform the decision even more. The fresher the data, the better the process will be.
Got it. And then and thinking about data too, I'm just wondering if, one, where does our data come from, and 2, does census data have anything to do with this process? Like, would new data around the census impact this process in the future?
So we're going to rely primarily on your student information system data. So we're going to get from the district a download of all of the students where they reside and understand where that is. We'll also work with the feeder districts, understand where the elementary students are outside the district's boundaries, so we know that they'll feed up into the district. We did enrollment projections for the district a few years back. Another agenda item, as you see in this item, is to update those enrollment projections with that similar data. The census data doesn't really come into play as much, because that is looking at a universe that may be larger than the students who attend your district. So we're really going to be focused just on our projection of students who reside within your boundaries and attend your schools.
Thank you. And my last question, I'm just wondering, just given that it's going to really impact the whole district, why there is no like representation from the elementary district. Like I know that there's one parent, right? Like that's what that committee calls for is one parent representative. Oh, from each of the middle schools. But I'm wondering why there isn't representation from the elementary district, given that it's going to impact the entire district.
That's a good question. It's certainly something we can discuss. This was, you know, the thought being that we're going to impact middle school and high school boundaries most through this process. The larger the committee, sometimes the harder it is to sift through and reach a consensus. And since we are limiting it to a discussion of middle and high school boundaries, it may make sense just to make the process a little bit more manageable. If there were discussions of elementary boundaries in the future, then we certainly would want to include those folks as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions? Director Medina?
Yeah, my question is around the composition of the committee as well. Given that a lot of this was in part triggered by the change at CCLA, would it also make sense to maybe add representation from like one parent from CCLA, since that's kind of a trigger to this? And I think I'm comfortable with it just being the middle and the high school, since it's only the high school district that we're looking at changing, not the elementary.
I was just gonna say, we can certainly discuss that with both Mr. Furchaw and Mr. Foster about including that, but this is really, you know, geared towards those middle school boundaries first, right? And then incorporating high school boundaries, knowing we'll have less one traditional middle school. But it's certainly something we can discuss.
I'd like to clarify that the board is going to get a midway report in November. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that I only see, we talked a little bit, community input. This is going to be impacting so many families, you know, years and years and years of families, that I want to make sure that we have enough time for enough venues and time for community input, and how that's going to look in COVID times also.
Yeah, if I can just jump in here, again, the number of community meetings and opportunities for input from the community is flexible, and certainly the board has a discretion, and the district does, to authorize additional meetings if necessary. Given the COVID time, these meetings would likely be, you know, in the foreseeable future, conducted via Zoom or some other platform that we're using here. It's just not conducive at this time to allow for in-person communications. But in addition to the meetings, the district would also facilitate receipt of electronic communications from community members, from parents, whoever, and the district could set that up via its website, and they would funnel, and they would have a place for those persons to communicate and provide that feedback, and that would be presented to the board as well as to Larry and myself, and as well as the committee, in terms of shaping the priorities moving forward and creating the attendance boundaries.
So to follow up with that, and this isn't a question, I'm breaking my own rule, but just to follow up with that, because we're right on this, is that we have a structured way for people to give input, and it's not last minute, and also that people are not giving input in a vacuum, that there's something for them to think about to give input to.
It's very much like what we did for the trustee areas. The community meetings, we had several community meetings, we had survey, there were multiple opportunities for community input, and I see this no different.
Good. I see Director Close's hand up and Director Medina's hand up one more time.
Thank you. I've got a question about whether or not there has been or how much this has been litigated so our board policy stems from an ed code around attendance or different education codes. And one of them says that you can't assign schools to students based on certain criteria. And that includes, all the protected classes, including race and ethnicity. And one of the things that we talk about is trying to minimize or mitigate the fact that we have segregated schools at this time. And so when we are engaging in discussions, if we start engaging in discussions around dealing with segregation in our schools, segregation based on ethnicity, is that legal? And has that been litigated? And if not, yeah, well, I'll give you that question, Counselor.
Okay. All right. So I'll just jump in and say that's one of the categories that is contemplated in BP 5116, says federal and state court mandates. So that is something that we have to observe in terms of the metes and bounds of how we can shape and make this determination on those grounds, and we will be governed by that. In terms of, there haven't been very many cases litigating this issue on that particular topic, but I don't have them at hand to be able to discuss. And, I'm not sure we would, kind of give them in this type of forum. But obviously the issue has been litigated, but primarily what's been litigated is the board's authority to, in fact, be the ones to decide and authorize the transition or the modification and adjustments of the boundary issues. So I could, certainly kind of review and find out, and that's one of the things we would be doing under the federal and state court mandates, is I would be bringing that information. Hey, here is the limits of what we can, of what the committee can and the board can and cannot consider, and this is what the authority is on that issue. So we would make sure that that line is followed and taken.
Mm-hmm. So, and then kind of a follow-up question to that is that when some years ago when we worked on changing the charter admission policy, what we used, we explicitly used socioeconomic status in that situation, and I'm wondering if we were to specifically use that that consideration, would that safely fall under other factors, number 12?
Yes. No, that is of course not within protected categories per se. And as you see, number 12, it says other factors, and what that's meant to allow. The 1 through 11 are the biggies, if you will. 12 is to allow the board and the community to provide some additional factors that are, district specific, specific to the student populations, attendance areas, the specific concerns that you have within your district. And certainly the board has liberty and discretion to authorize and instruct us to consider those additional factors in terms of creating the boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then follow up is around, do you think that if Proposition 209 was repealed, the affirmative action amendment, would that have any impact on our ability to use race and ethnicity as a factor in adjusting boundary lines?
Well, that
sorry to put you, I'm trying to put you on the spot, Counselor, and I should have given you these ahead of time, but busy. So
yes,
I know you can get back to us too.
Yes, well, I'll have to get back to you on that one on a couple reasons, because the two issues are not exactly aligned. And in addition, that may be a conversation that needs to be discussed in the more closed session forum, simply because of the implications of using the passage of Prop 209 as a governing factor for school attendance boundaries.
Fair enough.
But I will
Thank you.
certainly look into that.
Director Medina.
Thank you. You know, I'm thinking back to the early 90s, I think it was, when this issue was last addressed, when the new high schools were, you know, Maria Carrillo and Elsie Allen came up and district had to be redrawn. And I think the board tried to address the issues of equity and attendance before, and there was a huge uproar in the community, right? That led to the districts that we have now that are based around, you know, community schools and proximity to the school. I'm curious as to the process, transportation and how students get to school. Is that something that's looked at? Maybe trends that have changed since, you know, back in like the 90s to now, and what role that plays in the process. I want to say that I'm comfortable with the timeline, but I am interested in that and what role that could play in terms of the shaping of the district's transportation and how people get to school.
I mean, I think in general, you know, the desire is to have students attend schools that are in proximity to where they reside, so that there isn't a hardship for transportation on them. So that it's kind of just a general guiding rule that we would have in drawing attendance boundaries. I'm not sure, Rick, if there's anything else on transportation.
Certainly, we would take that into consideration, Director Medina. To Mr. Fershaw's point, creating access to these schools would also be important. We know that busing is somewhat available, but we have issues with busing, especially across district, as we experience now seemingly daily when we're back in traditional students in classroom scenarios. So that would be consideration as we move forward in this. It would be proximity and access to schools in neighborhoods.
And if you look, just to chime in on 5116, number 7 says transportation capacity. So that is something that is typically factored in when you're redrawing the attendance boundaries.
Is that capacity of the district or capacity of like families? Do we know?
It was probably written with the idea of home to school transportation, more so than parents. So the ability of the district to transport students, and you know, in districts that do a lot of home to school, is their way to reduce home to school transportation through boundary changes, perhaps, or not increase it through boundary changes. So that is probably the reason. It's just to have students who are as much as possible the ability to walk to school or get to school more easily and safely as well.
I am going to call for public comment at this point. Moderator, are there any public comments? Oh, excuse me. I think Director Sheffield is waving his hand.
Thank you. Again, with the safety part of it, the safety component, and maybe tied with transportation, I'm curious around, you'd mentioned walkability, you know, and I just want to make sure that we're looking at, you know, things might seem, proximity wise, might seem like a way to go, but really encourage us to work with safe routes to school on looking at the way that our city streets are laid out, our sidewalks are laid out, because what might seem like a no sense, very rational placement might not be the route. It might be the most direct route, but it might not be the safest route for walking and biking. Thank you.
Okay, I take that was a comment, not a question.
The question is, are we?
Yes.
Yes, I would with the folks that we have on the committee, between the principals, district staff, I think there's going to be an awareness of the safest and most efficient ways to get to school, and not relying on an outsider's perspective of what the map looks like, but really relying on people who live in the communities to say that that doesn't make sense.
We're going to move to public comment now. Moderator, do we have any public comments on agenda item 2? E2.
So at this time, we're going to ask anyone who wants to comment on E2 to please raise your hand. Click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll let you know when it's your turn to speak. And we'll start with Mara Ryan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for all your hard work. My name is Maura Ryan, and I am a parent of a middle schooler who lives within the Cook Middle School boundaries. She is not attending there, and it's more because of the needs of her older sister. We ended up at a charter school, which is K-8. So I'm wondering, I wasn't able to discern, looking at the different schools we have, is charter school for the arts included in that representation list? Because that does have a middle school. And I would encourage that to be the case, because I would imagine we're not the only family from some of the feeder districts and that attendance area that would love to have input and you know, be part of that process. So that's all. Thank you so much. And I used to work at CCLA, and I'm excited for all the positivity I've seen around the merger, and just want to support you all and say thank you. That's all.
Thank you.
Next is Will Lyon. Will, could you unmute yourself, please? Will, are you there?
How about that?
Can hear you now.
All right, you can take that off my 2 minutes. I'll go quick. Will Lyon for SRTA, up to $30 now. I'm echoing some of the same concerns about representation. We have 11 secondary schools. All of them have SRTA members. And here, as it's written up, we have 2 spots. I'm concerned for a couple reasons. One, it'll be hard for us to choose 2 people who could really represent the entire city if we only get the 2 schools. I follow Director Medina that it makes sense to try to focus on LC Allen and CCLA, since that's where the merger is affecting the area. But also, how can we expect a teacher who teaches at Cook to weigh in on what it's like to teach at Maria Carrillo? It's important to the district for a couple reasons. One is, whatever plan comes forward, you're going to want SRTA support. You're going to want to stand with you shoulder to shoulder and say, hey, it's a good plan. We'd like you to vote yes on it. And if we don't know what's happening, the odds of us opposing it because we don't understand it, or because we didn't get a chance to voice our concerns before the decisions were made, is increased. Lastly, there's two parts of being on a committee. You weigh in at the committee, but the accordion model that served us so well during the return to school plan is that the people's on the committee go back to their school sites, talk about what's happening, gather those concerns, keep everybody up to date, and then come back into those meetings and share those concerns, which maximizes the opportunity to solve problems before it gets to the board. So I'd like you to consider offering us a spot per school. I can't promise you that I would be able to fill them all, but I'd like to at least offer it, especially if we have teachers who are also parents and are working at that school site. I think it could be really powerful to have a parent/teacher perspective from each of the schools, especially if there are going to be significant changes. Certainly there are in the Southwest. Thank you.
Thank you, President Lyon.
And next is Tammy Afonso.
I have two concerns. The first one being not having the voice of the elementary parents in this process. Their boundaries aren't changing, but what is changing is where their child is going to go to school in the future. And so that's one concern. And the other one is also, I'd like to go along with Mr. Lyon, having representation across the schools for CSEA members who are actually in those particular middle schools. So I would like to see if we can have further discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, President Alfonso.
President Fong, there are no more hands raised.
Thank you to our commenters. Board, any other discussion on this? Director McCormick.
So I think this process that we're taking in these initial steps right now of analyzing and looking at redrawing our boundaries with an eye toward equity and balance is a great first step. Maybe this is part of a different discussion, but I just need to say it here that I have a concern, or maybe we need to simultaneously look at the board's policy and past practice and current practice on interdistrict transfers, and allowing a lot of that, because if we're going to spend an enormous amount of time and money and planning and effort in a time we're already stretched thin, which I'm fully in support of, I just want to make sure we don't do a whole bunch of work and then just allow movement everywhere, regardless of what the boundaries look like after we've redrawn them. So that's a concern of mine. So I just feel like that should be part of this discussion, maybe not in these initial stages, but I think we're going to have to take a hard look at that. And I think the board is going to need to make some decisions on what are acceptable reasons for interdistrict transfer and what are not. Again, with an eye towards equity and balance. So that's just a big concern I have. And I also very much appreciate the size of a committee is really has an effect on how long it takes to do things. But I think more representation in this case is probably better than less. So that's something that we should consider.
Thank you, Director McCormick. Other discussion, Director Minieri.
Thank you. I agree with Director McCormick that we really need to have a conversation about our interdistrict transfer policy. I think you articulated that really well, Director McCormick. And I have, you know, it's an issue that's really, really personal to me, because I see so much, like so many of my family members and my cousins, really my younger cousins, affected by that policy. And I think that this is a great opportunity to do that. And I think that, you know, if we're really taking the opportunity to address inequity seriously through this process, we can't leave that out of the conversation in any way. And I think President Fong said it best, that we can't, you know, make these decisions, or these recommendations can't be made in a vacuum. Addressing inequities can't be done in a vacuum. And so I would like to see a plan that does include more opportunities for engagement, especially if we're taking time into consideration and the size of a committee. Well, then there needs to be more opportunities for engagement, and that needs to be a process that is thoughtful and intentional, to make sure that we include all members of our community. And so thinking right now, and you know, about the digital era, the technology gaps that we're experiencing, you know, we need to think beyond just surveys and ways to engage people in that way. So it might take some time and creativity, but I think that we can do it. And I'd like to really emphasize that for something like this, we really need to have thoughtful participation, community participation in this process. So thank you for all your work and for, you know, bringing this conversation forward. And I wish that we had more time to do this too and understand the timeline. So whatever we can do to have more participation, I'm here to support that.
Thank you, Director Manieri. Director Close.
Thank you. First of all, I echo everything my colleagues have just said, in terms of, especially both around interdistrict transfer. Thank you, Director McCormick and Director Manieri for making sure we have meaningful engagement that's probably gonna be a lot of Zoom, which in some ways I think is easier, and we can do a ton more faster, and there are gonna be folks who are left out of that. So yeah, we need to be creative and intentional around that. Also, I totally agree that we need to have more representation from our staff in this. And but I also understand that the size of the committee is hard. What I'd like to suggest is, and I also think that elementary's got to be included in this. We are a school, you know, we operate as a unified school district, and I think that's important. So I'd suggest that we do something like a subcommittee where there is a representative from every school, and that includes elementary schools, and then that there are 3 representatives from that subcommittee, 1 high school, 1 middle school, or 1 elementary school, or even better, 2 from each level, 1 from each side of the freeway on the committee. That would be my recommendation. But I do think that we do need staff buy-in on this, and I think more representation from our classified staff as well would be helpful. Just some way to make it manageable. So maybe a subcommittee structure, something to think about. Also, I think Ed, what he said, I think during the question period, working with Safe Routes to Schools, I think is really important here, and that they should even maybe have somebody on the committee, because if, yeah, and that's it. Thank you.
Director De La Cruz.
Thank you. Just want to give another shout out to Ed for raising the Safe Routes to Schools and the importance of that program and really making true our commitment to neighborhood schools. And this calls for additional partnerships with our infrastructure kind of partners at the City of Santa Rosa. And so this is a great opportunity to recognize co-benefits in, you know, these conversations. I want to say the word. I want to say that we're talking about integration. I want us to say that that was the intent of, you know, this conversation, you know, when the board first raised it, recognizing that we were going to close a school that was segregated and that we had an opportunity to integrate our school systems. And so I think that in that way, it's going to be really critical for us to truly understand the bounds of, you know, our ability to do that intentionally, and you know, to do that with our eyes wide open, recognizing that, you know, in most cities like Santa Rosa, historically, that freeway went through and divided communities based on race, based on income. And so we have an incredible opportunity here to not only kind of make true the promise of neighborhood schools, but also the promise of integration. It's 2020. We need to figure out a way to have this conversation clearly, deliberately, honestly, and like I said, with intention. So I'm really looking forward, you know, to really being able to understand the boundaries of our ability to have that conversation, because that's the one that I want to have. Thanks.
Director De La Cruz, I could just hug you. Thank you for saying that. There's the reason why you were Sonoma County's equity guru, equity person. I don't know your title, I'm sorry.
I am the interim director of the Sonoma County very first ever Office of Equity. So I run a small but mighty startup. That's what I do. And we're in a new adventure together. I think all of us in our community, you know, it's right now has a little home in Sonoma County, or in like the county of Sonoma offices, but you know, I don't think that any of this would have been possible without seeing how we do it here at Santa Rosa City Schools. So President Fong, I could hug you too.
So I will close this by saying this, that I want to thank Superintendent Kitamura and fellow board members, because this is unprecedented work. This is right work. And I think it's going to be very emotional. I don't know why school has become so emotional lately. It just has. And I think that we are going to be pushing a lot of buttons. But I want people to really understand, as we're moving forward, as we're kicking this off, as we are beginning this journey, that it is not about taking anything away from anybody. It is about creating new and creating inclusion and creating equity for all of us. It doesn't mean anyone's going to get anything taken away. It's not less than. We are building a very strong school system for our city. And so everybody who's going to be on the committee, thank you so much. I also support more representation in elementary schools, and we do have a tight timeline. And one good thing about Zoom is that you don't have to travel. So we can kind of catch up some time there. All right, so I think
Director Sheffield wanted to say something.
I'm sorry, I didn't see him. Director?
Thank you. I wanted to just encourage us, in addition to Safe Routes to School, City of Santa Rosa has a bicycle and pedestrian advisory board that we should reach out to them as well to have representation from them. They do a lot of the laying out of the safe routes. They work with Safe Routes to School, but they do a lot of the infrastructure work around the City of Santa Rosa, looking at sidewalks, looking at bike lanes as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Superintendent.
So we will definitely, note everything that has been said, work with Larry and Milt, and see, what we can do around the committees and inclusion. So we'll definitely do that. In listening about the safe routes and the bicycle advisory, City of Santa Rosa, it almost feels like that's a whole nother committee on its own, because then I thought about Caltrans and all the other, things that are involved with the highways going right through the, all of this. So anyway, it just got me thinking in other directions. So yes, we will work on this, see what we can do logically in terms of timeline, inclusivity, getting feedback, and I'm sure with all of our minds put together, we will figure out a way.
All right, power to you all. And I see Director Close frantically, one more thing she has to say.
Okay, that's probably extra money because of how I wanted the extra time, and then I did that. Just really fast, I meant to say this before, is that it would be really great if we could look to find some other districts who have done this recently with cities that are similarly divided in the way ours is, which is very common, so that should be relatively easy, and see if there are any best practices. Is there anything that we can learn from them? So if we could kind of look around, use our contacts through CSBA and AXA and everyone to see how they did this, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, we can do that. Also, it is at the top of our list about policy with regard to open enrollment and interdistrict. So do not fret. That is also a part of this mix as well.
So another heavy lift. Let's just do everything at once.
No worries. Hey, the elementary part of it, I do want to say that's next. That's the next project, because we're seriously going to have to look at our elementary schools and severely declining enrollment. And I'm just going to put it out there because it needs to be put out there. Some of our elementary schools are now, really below 300. It's not just one. I think it's 2 or 3 now. And so we're going to have to look at that as well. So I just want to make sure I am priming the pump. There's other things we got to work on too. So.
And I also see Director Medina's got his hand one more time up.
Just since the elementary stuff was brought up, I think that I am interested in hearing what the status of district consolidation will be, and hope that comes up prior to any elementary school stuff as it relates to this. So.
All right, I want to thank Milton Foster and Larry Furchow. We'll see you again. Thank you so much. We are going to take a couple-minute break. It is time to change interpreters.
Thank you, President
Adina, I'm
Fong.
ready.
We're all set, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to item E3. This is a discussion on extended learning programs, summer of 2020. Dr. Kitamura.
And once again, I'm not going to waste time. I want to get right to this report, and so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Guzman.
Thank you. Good evening, President Fong, Superintendent Kitamura, members of the board. Tonight, two directors in teaching and learning, Director Dillon and Director Zolinardo, will be given an update on our extended learning programs that occurred this summer of 2020. Prior to them giving the report, I do want to say that, I'm very grateful to the teachers, students, parents, and administrators who really put their heart and soul in making these opportunities. Obviously, we knew that we needed to offer credit recovery, but the fact that we were also able to offer enrichment programs that were a little bit different than they've had in the past. We weren't able to offer Maker or Mike Hauser, but the fact that we did have these other opportunities, I think is a testament just to our strength and also our commitment to not just addressing learning loss, but also the importance of enrichment, and even the fact that we're able to offer in an online platform music and art. So very grateful. And with that, I turn it over to my two directors, Director Dillon and Director Zolinardo.
Good evening, Superintendent Kitamura, President Fong, members of the board. I believe Mr. Zolinardo is going to share the screen so we can share our presentation with you. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, Tim. Thank you. All right, so as always, we are pleased to share with you tonight a summary of the extended school year programs in the district that we were able to offer this summer. Last spring, as we all know, was an unprecedented time in education in which schools had to make a rapid shift to a whole new way of teaching and learning. And in March, when we needed to pivot to remote learning, the district was in the midst of planning and hiring for all of our extended learning programs. While we were hopeful, we kind of held out hope as we went through March and April and May that maybe things would change and the shelter-in-place orders would shift. We soon realized that we would not be able to get back into the classroom and programs would have to adjust. And so that meant, and you'll see tonight, that meant that some programs, such as our partnership with Sonoma State's Excel for Youth, had to be canceled because they rely on hands-on, face-to-face learning experiences. And so we were not able to offer programs such as that. But we are very pleased, however, that there were many programs that were able to adjust and pivot and serve students in the summer. So the Migrant Education Summer Program, we receive special funding every year to serve our students who are designated as migrant. And so this year, Aida Diaz was the principal of this program, and it served 4th through 6th grade students in a remote learning environment. And they got very creative, and they are used, of course, to being together, but they sent home hands-on materials to students. And you see some pictures here of things students created that allowed students to engage in hands-on activities that were connected and built literacy and math skills. And so participation was great, 97% attendance for those that were enrolled, and the feedback from teachers was really honestly that this gave them a great opportunity to kind of dig into their planning a little bit more and try some things out, and students enjoyed it as well. As Dr. Guzman referenced, we were able to continue to provide some of our music and arts programs. Mariachi and the summer arts camps were still offered. Luther Burbank Center did a fantastic job of creating lessons and experiences that would give students opportunities to learn music, play music, sing and dance. And so each camp was 3 weeks long, and students got to play the ukulele, percussion, all sorts of really exciting, engaging activities for students. And even though overall there was a decrease in the number of participants for this program, actually the number of students receiving elective credits, because high school students who attend can receive elective credits, it really only decreased by 1, from 15 last year to 14 this year. So that's really good news.
Great, thank you, Director Dillon, for starting us off. Good evening, Superintendent Kitamura, President Fong, and members of the board. It's our pleasure to be with you this evening, and I'll pick up here with the extended school year, and just remind us that the purpose of extended school year is about for students with disabilities, and it focuses on reducing regression and increasing basically recouping. So recouping is obviously the focus on making sure that gains against and for the IEP goals and learning of skills and knowledge continue to accelerate going into the summer months, so students have less catching up to do when the school year starts. And the more this is done, the less regression that students experience with their learning, and the quicker they can re-engage when the fall semester begins, and we're in it right now. So the administrator, Brad Coscarelli, 26 certificated staff, and 24 classified staff all collaborated to support students as best they could. Often they were delivering materials to families, making sure they were following safety protocols when doing so, but trying to ensure that that hands-on enriching experience could continue.
Tim is muted.
Tim?
Oh, I hit mute when I went to go switch the slide. Thank you so much, Director Medina. So I want to go back a step in case part of it got cut off. I do want to take a pause and make sure I thank all of our administrators and all the staff who worked our extended summer programs, especially in a different atmosphere than we've ever done it before. But I wanted to make sure to give a little special thank you to Kim Clissold and Andrea Correa, the principal and vice principal of Santa Rosa High School, respectively. Just for the bulk of a major part of the program fell upon their shoulders. And they were able to put together a program that met students' needs virtually, so that middle school students could pursue enrichment, and high school students could pursue credit recovery as needed. I know they spent countless evenings working beyond the long typical hours of administrative work as they are, to make sure it was a supportive program for everyone. So with the middle school program, we did start to incorporate some online learning through Acellus, which is a platform that allowed students to engage in math enrichment in the middle school level. And it was a kind of a pilot opportunity for us to use it, and got some really strong feedback and reviews. And it will be part of the ongoing professional development that Santa Rosa City Schools offers to support students across the district in the coming Wednesdays in the first part of the year in the fall. So it's definitely led to a tool that can be leveraged in an environment that we not necessarily choosing to be in, but doing so for the best interest of all of our students and staff and families and community. And we're hoping to see it used in other places. The key for this program is really about engaging students as much as possible, so that they could kind of push their learning ahead of when they might actually take a specific course in math that challenges them at a certain level. And really, this is kind of the acceleration of learning we look for to allow middle school students to kind of flourish moving forward and to find success and comfort and kind of confidence in mathematics. We also had a high school summer program, as I alluded to. Obviously, credit recovery is a significant thing for seniors who need additional opportunities to graduate on time. Also, multiple other students at grades 9 through 11 they can make progress on recouping missed credits. And luckily, by using the Cyber High platform in the summer extended program, we have credit recovery that begins, and for any reason, and we heard many listed earlier tonight, for why someone might have to interrupt their learning in a remote situation, students' progress is saved. And so then students can pick up this fall, they can continue with where they left off with credit recovery. They might have just a few small things left to do to complete a unit and recoup credits. So it not only helps the seniors who are actively trying to make sure they finish high school and graduate on time, but it also provides a great leg up for students as they move into this year with an opportunity to pick up exactly where they left off. If they didn't quite finish something, that will help them feel more on track for graduating high school as we begin. And I'll turn it back to Director Dillon.
Yeah, you know, I think back, I've done this presentation or presented on summer school for several years now, and I realized that we added this slide in and we've never really discussed at length that what is necessary in terms of collaboration. So it just felt even more so than ever as we had to make the change and quickly kind of adjust, just important to highlight the collaboration that's required to put on the summer programs. I think it's important to note that it takes every department within Santa Rosa City Schools to make it happen, from teaching and learning to special education to technology, human resources, food services. So it really is a collaborative effort that's worth noting. And so we just want to kind of acknowledge everyone that played a part in what is our usual planning, our regular planning, and then the quick adjustment to say, how can we continue to serve students in this new format and quickly make some adjustments, but make sure students have some opportunities to continue their learning. So just want to thank everyone that is a part of the process.
Yeah, and I would follow that up with a thank you as well. And I'll throw in a surprise thank you at this moment for my peers, directors in teaching and learning, who basically I was learning kind of the role of helping with summer school for the first time. And they were basically trying to make sure I was up to speed in learning. And then often quickly, just as fast as they were learning something new, they were trying to make sure I understood how to take part in it. So thanks go out to them as well for really kind of coaching me and making sure things went off successfully. Which takes us kind of to things to consider moving forward. Obviously, just like all of us who are here tonight watching, are on these Zoom speaking, we hope to see extended learning programs return to like a full physical attendance and participation in summer of 2021. It will obviously allow the summer programs to return to maybe an even greater hands-on level of experiential learning, which we think enriches and stimulates students so they can really grow from one academic year to the next. Also, we've learned that attendance can actually be very robust via remote learning. And so maybe a blended model for summer programs could become a distinct way to increase student access and participation moving forward. So a remote situation may not be something we all want all people to have to experience. It might be something that a few would choose to experience. It'll be important to consider extended learning programs in the context of the institution of Santa Rosa City Schools and all of its initiatives, programs and services, some of which have been discussed tonight, which takes us then to the final piece. I'm going to speak a little bit, and then I'm going to turn this back to Dr. Ana Guzman to wrap us up. But extended learning programs obviously aren't solely about the summer. They're connected to and affect, and they act as like a bridge in a larger systemic approach to supporting learners across all of Santa Rosa City Schools. So Santa Rosa City Schools does have a strong guiding document in the MVP and in the specific priorities that have become enshrined in the strategic plan, because I think we all believe that these speak to fundamental insights about learning. It has to be relevant. It has to connect to students' personal lives. As our critical theorists say, students have to see themselves in the curriculum. And it has to be less monolithic and more flexible in responding to real-world events and experiences. So these tenets are accompanied by really practical aspects of schooling as well that need evaluation and calibration at deep levels to be truly impactful on learners. They could include assessment practices and considering how real-world projects can accelerate those, and a host of many other things that make a significant difference in the complexity, value, and immersiveness of learning. So thank you for your time, Dr. Guzman.
Yeah, thank you, Director Zolinardo. You know, I'd like to say too that as we look at those bulleted points on this list, I'm very grateful that, and I'm going to talk about silver linings under sort of our current umbrella, is that we do have the 2 hours of professional development each week on Wednesdays. And as we're currently sort of working in a more technical phase right now, just making sure that we can address the needs of our 900 teachers around just platforms and technology. But as we move to more adaptive ways in which professional development is going to look, I really think we can dive into some of these on a deeper level and a more coherent level as we are going to have that time. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think too, we're going to learn a lot from this whole experience and how we really can utilize real world projects to really boost up our students. And also I'm very grateful to our teachers who have been great partners as we've maneuvered through not just these summer enrichment and credit recovery, but as we move forward about next steps. So with that, I turn it back over to the board.
All right, so this is a discussion. Board members, comments? Okay. Director McCormick, Director Medina.
And Director Manieri. Okay. Dead.
Jill, you're muted.
Dang it. I was unmuted and then I remuted myself. Awesome. My question is, I see potential need in a good way for significantly expanding this program. And I'm just wondering what sort of capacity would be max on that, or as is currently, or is this something we look to develop? I just foresee, you know, a really challenging school year ahead of all of us. And I think it's going to make some supplemental enhancement, support, you know, more than just support programs, like actual opportunity to continue education, connect education, more education spread out over the entire 12 months that we're looking at right now. And I'm just kind of wondering what our capacity is and the funding and just kind of where are we on that, if it could actually be something big that we could expand.
I'm going to address this a little bit, and then Dr. Guzman, I'm sure, will. I am a firm believer in, well, President Fong would say, you know, change up schedules completely. But in my own little world, this was the way in which we could continue learning, but in a different way, is summer school. You know, we are one of the few districts that still offer summer school. And we have people wanting to come into our summer school from other districts because of this. For me, there is no limit except the number of people we can get to come and teach. That is really, if you think it, you innovate it, and you can teach it, come on aboard. But it is, that's where our limit is what the number of teachers we can hire.
So the limit's the number of teachers we can hire, or the limit is we have a certain amount of money and that limits how many people we can hire?
No, it's the availability of teachers in the summer.
Okay. And then I assume they do get paid?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay. I mean, I assume that, but just want to make sure.
Thank you, Director McCormick. Director Medina, and then Director Manieri.
I'm glad the teachers get paid. What I was going to ask is, in relation to Cyber High, you know, just could you remind me, has the system in terms of like rigor been updated to meet our new graduation standards as it relates through A to G, or is that still in the process?
I'll let Director Zolinardo respond to that, but yes, it has changed and it is responding to our needs, but I'll have him go into more detail.
Thank you. So Cyber High is affiliated with UC Doorways. Obviously, courses in there are A through G approved. And so those allow them to have the, the requirement to allow students for the CSU and UC transferability, and then for them to engage with learning that requires them to meet the Common Core standards and the expectations for them to get the content and skills required.
And that's all I have for right now.
Director Manieri?
I have a question around the demographic data around the graduation status. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about, so how many students were enrolled in Cyber High and attempted credits and actually like successfully completed those credits. Like I'm really interested in knowing how many students didn't fulfill those credits and weren't able to graduate.
So I would actually ask Andrea Carrera to be able to answer that, as she was one of the administrators overseeing that program.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. So in our Cyber High program this summer, we enrolled about 980 students at the beginning of summer. Not everyone showed up, and so as we progressed through, we continued to add students throughout the summer off a waiting list. We had 305 students who completed a summer school class in Cyber High, and many students who completed several summer school classes in Cyber High. So they were able to do as many as they possibly could. We had numerous students, and I'm sorry, I don't know the number, who completed 2. The most one student completed was 8 in the summer. So they really worked hard. If they were working hard, they could get it done. All students who were in the Cyber High classes, and of the 980 that were enrolled, 200 of them were in the Acellus program. So that was a different program for math credit recovery for our Math 1 students. And so that we wouldn't include in those 305 students that completed the Cyber High classes. All of the students who were not able to complete those Cyber High classes, they are still able to do the work now. And once comprehensive high schools are able to hire out for their Cyber High teachers, and typically that starts in the 3rd or 4th week of the first semester, those students can continue that work and finish those classes. So there's no moratorium on time. Once they start, they can continue working in the class and get it done. And what we've done is we created a file that we shared out with all the high schools with a list of those students at their high school that did not complete the class they had started, so that when that Cyber High teacher is hired, they can reach out to those students and get them back on track. And most of the students were very close, but as you know, summer school this year was only 5 weeks and they couldn't get it done for one reason or another, but we are encouraging them to complete those classes. We did give out over 2,500 credits this summer in Cyber High.
That's great. And I'm wondering, to Director Zalunardo's point about, seeing kind of a positive impact of doing distance learning or extended summer programs. I'm wondering how all this data the past years of doing Cyber High, or past summers of doing Cyber High.
So typically in summers in the past, when we are able to be in person, we only offer Cyber High to those students who have not graduated as a credit recovery option. And then if there's still room after we have enrolled those students in that credit recovery option, we'll continue to bring kids in off of the waiting list. Because when you're in-person summer school, you have to complete 60 hours of attendance in order to get those credits. So not only do you have to successfully pass the class, but you need to be in class for 60 hours of the summer. And so what we would do is we would have students that would come on the wait list, and then we would bring them into Cyber High. And so typically we would go through, depending on how many teachers we have, typically we'd run 2 teachers, and typically they're the same teachers. I've done summer school about 15 times. So we always have the same cohort of teachers that kind of come together. We're a little summer school family and we work together. And those 2 teachers would really get those kids moving out. And so we're really proud of the number of students we can graduate in the summer. Typically we graduate out about 35 kids that didn't make it in June. And that's a really exciting time. And it's a very exciting process when they walk into the office and we clear them, and it makes us feel really good and reminds us of why we're all there, is so that they can get that credit. And then the rest of those students are in credit recovery as if they would have done it this summer. So we don't really let a lot of kids into the cyber high aspect in a typical year, because we would rather have those in-person classes with them where we feel students can be more successful, especially with credit recovery in such a short amount of time, and it's such a fast pace thing. You only have that 5 weeks with them. So I don't know how it would look if we continued to offer Cyber High in a virtual way in the summer. I think kids would definitely be open to it, and they really did well this summer. We had a lot of kids who really did well in this model.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I see no other hands for questions from the board. Moderator, do we have any public comment?
So this is a call for public comment on item E3. If you'd like to make a public comment, please raise your hand by pushing the raise hand button. And the first public comment will be from Maura Ryan.
Yes, hello again. I first want to say just really profound appreciation for all the work that I think that must have taken, the depth and breadth of who you've been able to reach out to, and how many students, and changing everything, adjusting last minute. I just, big kudos to the district and directors Dylan and everybody who was involved with all of this. As far as I think it was actions review, or I can't remember the name of it, but as far as expanding, just one idea I would suggest is if for some reason we're still in distance learning at the end of the school year, I know traditionally extended school year for special education students is reserved for generally students who have more moderate to severe disabilities and might not continue to make progress with the long length of time. But lots of students are struggling, at the mild to moderate level, and some didn't have, my daughter didn't have any resources, resource specialist programming between March and the end of the school year. So that might be something where you might want to expand, is for maybe not everyone's an IEP decision, perhaps case by case, that if there's opportunities for some enrichment for kids with IEPs that maybe receive resource services. But I think it's phenomenal. You just kept putting up new slides, and I was just like, wow, I was really, really blown away. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Maura.
Next is Will Lyon.
How's that? Woohoo, got it right. I'm a Lion representing Santa Rosa Teachers Association with 900 members. I don't want to relitigate the choices we made around graduation requirements, but I want to remind the board that one of the outcomes of those changes is that we have about twice as many Fs as we did before we changed those graduation requirements. Based on the numbers from the conversation that we had in January, we estimated that SRT estimates that we're going to need to recover about 4,000 Fs. And we're learning tonight that we actually recovered around 442. One of the slides said we had 300 kids that passed 2 or more classes. I think we had 300 kids that passed 1 or more, with some kids passing 2. I think the work that the teachers and the administrators did was phenomenal. So I'm not blaming anybody for that, but we recovered about 10% of the courses that we needed to, based on the number of Fs that we had at the semester. So I know that we agree to disagree on whether or not it's better to have opportunity, or whether we should look at adjusting some of those requirements. I think we all agree that we need to support our students more, our struggling students, and one of those supports is credit recovery. I understand Ridgeway is full at this point. I don't know if it's got a waiting list or how many are on it, but it maxes out around 275. So if your fault, my fault, nobody's fault. We are requesting that the board take a look at our capacity to recover the courses that we need to in order to minimize the number of students who don't graduate. COVID made this worse. Last year, without COVID, we recovered a little over 1,200 courses, right? About 3 times more, but that's still short of the approximately 4,000 that we needed. So I'm really excited to hear that Acellus is successful. I'm hearing good things all around. I like all the possibilities that come with it, but I also think if we don't take a good hard look about the credit recovery that we need to stem off non-grads, especially for this first cohort, 2022, that are now currently juniors. And if we don't take a good hard look at that, we're gonna regret that later. So my numbers are a little soft, right? I'm estimating. I know that when we talked about this before, some people criticize my numbers. Fair enough, please take a good hard look and let's see what let's get out of the estimates and see what we have to do. And if, like me, the board determines that we're behind and we're in trouble and we need to make some adjustments, we're gonna wanna know that as soon as possible and not wait another year for next summer. Thank you.
President Fong, there are no more hands raised.
Okay, thank you so much. Board members, any other discussion comments? I want to thank Directors Zelenardo and Dillon and Assistant Superintendent Guzman for their work, and the principals, Vice Principal Correa and Principal Klissel. And I also want to reiterate on the presentation itself that Dr. Guzman, you have added some questions that I want to make sure that we're really paying attention to. How do we assure that all students receive the best first instruction in our tiered model with student support? It's kind of re-engagement again. How do we honor the identities of our students and incorporate their assets into a teaching and learning system that builds their agency and initiates development of purpose? And so when we're talking about student identity, and Director Zelenardo, you spoke to this on one of the slides, we are all for that. So thank you very much, and we will wait to continue to hear more and more everywhere we turn in every single part of our teaching and learning. Thank you so much. All right, we are moving on to, we have moved that to another meeting, and we're moving to E5. This is an action item, review and approval of updates to Board Policy 7310, naming of facilities. I think this might be the third time we're seeing it.
Yes, I'll turn it over to Dr. Guzman.
Yes, good evening. Yes, you are seeing this again. Per the board's request, the language including financial contributions will be stricken from Board Policy 7310 when discussing naming of a facility. Also, in the attachments, you can actually see some of the forms that were updated for the naming. I did have an opportunity to meet with both principals, and they are very clear about where they are and the next steps. I also know that may be changing a bit based upon some of the comments tonight, but I do appreciate the partnership with those principals as we move forward. And so hopefully this can now be moved back over to you with those changes. Thank you.
Thank you for that work. Board members, questions on this? Director Medina.
Yeah, just not necessarily on the specific language of the policy, but just towards the bottom, the revision history seems to be gone. I don't know if we could continue to include that. I think I find revision history very important in terms of looking back at the history of actions taken on a policy. So I don't know if that was meant to be excluded or.
Do you mean as an actual attachment or the board agenda item that the revision took place?
On the policy, the attachment,
Uh-huh.
all the revisions.
Strikeouts and
From the past?
No, the dates that the policy has been revised historically.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Added on.
Original adoption date, and then has the current date, but all the other dates have been removed. We could include those. To me, when I'm looking back at policies, I like looking at those, and then I could review previous meetings to see what's happened. And
Okay.
that's usually an easy reference instead of having to search through every meeting to find that. So if we could keep that, I think it'd be appreciated.
I'm happy to do so.
I noticed that it says that you're bringing this back to the board in November. Could you clarify that?
So that was bringing back the work of the two school sites with the renaming and the work of their committees. That was the tentative timeline.
Okay. So in light of Director De La Cruz's comments, would the board want to consider extending that timeline? Director Medina?
Are we discussing this board policy amendment, or are we discussing that issue? Because I think my understanding is we're talking about this board policy amendment.
We are about the board policy amendment.
Yeah,
all completely relevant to this. So.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
just a discussion and a suggestion. Director De La Cruz?
I was going to say, to me, the implementation of the policy is separate and apart from the policy. And so we can choose when we want to implement the policy. And if tonight is a time for us to consider the policy, then I wouldn't necessarily want to back away from that. But I do just wanted to kind of save the good folks at Burbank from having to do a whole nother community engagement and et cetera, process for renaming. But I agree with Director Medina that those two issues are separate from each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then we can call for the vote on this one. Director Medina?
I'd like to move that we adopt and waive second reading of Board Policy 7310, naming of facilities, as presented with the incorporation of the revision history.
A second.
Any other discussion? All right, so that was moved by Director Medina and seconded by Director Manieri. Adina, may we have the roll call vote, please?
Director Lopez.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Close. Director Close.
Oh. Is she in the waiting? Where is she? Is she in the waiting room? Wait.
Lip said aye.
Oh.
We can't hear you.
Oh, there she is.
Thumbs up?
You owe $25.
Yeah, your sound's cut out.
30 and rising.
Her mic disconnected maybe.
Why is it muted? Let's see.
Adina, she gave a thumbs up. I'm going to count that as a yes, as an aye.
President Fong.
Aye. Thank you. That passes. Diane, do we need to talk about, how do we talk about that November timeline?
Dr. Guzman, what was the, when you met with Principal Storrell?
Yes.
Did she indicate that it would be challenge, or what did she indicate?
Both principals indicated that they were feeling and had heard back from their staffs that, they were feeling with the start of school that it was a bit overwhelming. And that is why we did move it until the November and not October, giving them a bit more time. I know that both principals were collectively wanting to do this in essence together, being able to, you know, support each other as they maneuver through this, wanting to make sure that they adhere not only to the board policy, but also to the importance of hearing from the community and doing it right, and making sure that when they went to the board, that all options had been vetted appropriately.
Okay. I think Director Medina had a comment, President Fong.
I was just going to say a point of order that, you know, this isn't agendized, you know, a future
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah.
Okay, so we can bring it back.
Yeah.
Thank you. E6. This is a discussion and action possible first reading of potential waiver of second reading, the updated board policy 9323, which is meeting conduct. And pulling it up right here. So I'm bringing this to our board. Diane, do you want to say anything else before I start? Okay. And so I'm bringing this to us because I had at one point restricted speaking time to 2 minutes, as we had very, very fraught discussions and a lot of public comment. And our meetings were going, every single meeting was going 11:30, midnight. I think we went 12:45 one evening. And so I had restricted public comments. And to me, that was not something I really wanted to do. As a board member and not the president, I never wanted to restrict people's comments. I always wanted to make sure they had their full time, that they got to speak, you know, as many comments as possible, that we would just do that. And it was different when we were in person, when we had blue cards and there was kind of cut off for blue cards. But when we're looking at the Zoom hand raising list, there's no cutoff. And so people we can keep raising hands, and it's been very long. So I wanted to know what people thought. I wanted to raise this for discussion. And what we're talking about is in the board policy, it's 3 minutes for public comment per person. And the board could restrict when we agree to keep the public comment to 20 minutes, which we have never done. Well, maybe Jenny Close did that when she was president. She's shaking.
I never did that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I never did that.
Visit this with everybody. I'm not suggesting anything. I just wanted to start hearing comments and what people think about how long our meetings are taken, this whole pandemic Zoom thing, and how things are shifted a little bit. So your thoughts. Let's start with Jill McCormick, then Ed Sheffield, then Omar Medina.
I think this is a good discussion to have. Just in general, I think we should probably talk about some of the things that are listed here. But yeah, I think in general, we just need to do a better job as a board, I think, to be more efficient in these meetings, so that we are just governing at a higher level, a higher capacity, and while still allowing for people to have access to communicate with us and share with us, particularly during public comments. And I don't know, we should probably get down into some brass tacks about this, but I think we should set whatever we decide, we should set some kind of a norm or a preliminary, a standard going into most meetings, so people kind of know what the general rule is, but that we write the language in such a way that allows for some flexibility, because we've definitely had issues this summer that just needed significant amount of time. So where it says individual speakers shall be allowed 3 minutes, I think, I would change that to up to 3 minutes. Because I think hearing from more people in a shorter amount of time, to me, is more important than hearing from less people for a longer amount of time. So I just want to make sure whatever the numbers we decide, I just think we should, use some language like up to or maximum of or something like that, and allows for some wiggle room. Because like a 20 minutes, I love that idea, but there's definitely some issues that came up this summer that 20 minutes wasn't going to cut it. So I don't know, just like some up to maximum type of things. And then I don't know, and this might be, I don't think I see it on here, but I would also toss out the idea of limiting our comments as board members as well, and putting a possible time limit on that as well, with, again, flexibility as situation happens. But I think we should also, if we're going to put some limits out there, I think we should put some limits on ourselves as well.
Thank you. Director Sheffield.
I agree to much of what Director McCormick had brought up about, the big issue items. I think that there's some housekeeping that we can do internally around controlling the length, the time of the meetings. If we have a big issue item, we know it's a big issue item, we don't need to set the agenda to be as stacked as we have seen it in the past. So I think that's one thing that we can address is, and I get the sentiment of doing this and wanting to control the time. And as Director McCormick had pointed out, maybe there's a way we can state it, we can phrase it to control the process. But I'm a little bit worried about the 20-minute time. I just don't think that there's really enough to express the voice of the public in a 20-minute period of time. Part of my job is to participate in public meetings, Board of Supervisors, City Council meetings, and when it's the public comment process, oftentimes this is the only way and the only time that people in the community have an opportunity to express their concerns on an issue, their support, their opposition. And a lot of times it's really annoying. I was on a Board of Supervisors meeting yesterday. An agenda item was set for 9 o'clock. I got my kids logged on Zoom. I was ready to participate, and it didn't happen until 12:45, right? First item on the agenda, and it didn't happen, right? I was frustrated. I know that the supervisors are frustrated, but this is just something, that I personally feel we have to accept as being public servants, elected officials, is that we have to make ourselves available and make our board meetings open to the public in a way that they're able to express themselves. Now, are there things that we can do? We can restrict the time in the Zoom process. I think maybe an hour. I liked how we did that. That seemed to control a lot of people. The 20-minute time, I just personally don't think that is a long enough period of time on the issues that we bring up. Thank you.
Director Medina, then Director De La Cruz, then Director Close.
Thank you. I don't necessarily see anything that we need to change in the policy. I think if anything, I would remove that 20-minute limit, but it's, it's something that we may do. So I don't see any essential need to do that. I think the way the policy is written allows for the, decrease to 2 minutes, right? Or we're able to increase that time limit depending on what the agenda is looking like. Ultimately, I think the issue that we're facing right now is agenda management, planning the agenda adequately based on the types of issues that are coming up and the type of response that we'll get from the community. I think that the one thing that we maybe need to look at is going from physical meetings to Zoom meetings is that issue of blue cards, right? So before we have an idea of how many people are going to speak to an item because of blue cards when we're having physical meetings. Now we don't know until the item pops up and we see the hands raised. So maybe the issue is not the policy, but it's maybe looking at how we can better administer that part of of meeting management? How do we know who's going to speak to what in advance, if possible? If there's no solution, then what we should have been doing that hasn't been done effectively is when we say we're going to cut off a list at a certain level, track that, cut it off, and not take further comments that keep popping up, which is something that we've consistently done. That's added to the problem that I think we're facing. And if we're limiting to 2 minutes, as has been this past practice, and limiting it to an hour, that's basic math. 30 people are speaking. Once we have 30 speakers, it's off. It's how we can do it with the system that we manage. But I think we could come up with some sort of better system that's equivalent to the blue cards that will help us do that. But I'm with Ed. Part of our role is listening to folks, restricting it in any way. I hate cutting people to 2 minutes, but I understand it because it allows us to listen to more people. And having people be heard, I think, is critical. I don't like the idea of cutting off a list from people that want to speak, because honestly, one of the things that I love about this Zoom meetings is that it's allowed so many more people to participate in our meetings. Didn't we have like a meeting with like 1,000 people or something involved? I mean, just think about that in relation to people going to a physical meeting. We've increased participation in our meetings. I think that's beautiful. That's, people engage in democracy, and I love that. So I don't want to restrict it. I don't think we need to necessarily change our policy. I think we need to change how we administer the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Director De La Cruz, and Director Manieri, Director Close.
I just want to, my kid had just left the room, but he wanted to say that we could do a better job with the agenda. And controlling the length of our meetings. So sorry for having kid privileges of a board member.
Which child?
Oh, that was Ome.
Ome.
He was like, please make the agenda shorter. So I do think that we could do less talking ourselves, or kind of checking ourselves. I love the idea of putting ourselves under the same limits that we do the public. President Fong, I just want to say, I really appreciate the way that you moderate our meetings in that way. And I think that, that has gone a long way to making us more efficient. So thumbs up on that, and thank you. I also think that you can get a heck of a lot out of your mouth in 2 minutes. And so I think with, complicated items where we know we need to hear a lot more voices, I don't know that 20-minute limit is kind of enough for that. But I do think that, we've also heard, some of the meetings that have happened during this Black Lives Matter across the country, what people can get out in a minute is amazing. And so, again, I think there's ways to limit the number of, the amount of time that people speak so that we can hear from more voices. So I would be supportive of, where we know we have a lot of voices coming in, to limit the amount of time. And probably if we have one of those meetings as we're talking about school integration, that's going to be a fun one, right? Where we're going to need to figure out how we limit the number of actual comments during a meeting, and to make sure that we allow for, more email, or, another meeting, another night of the week where we're hearing just that item, but some special meetings. I think that's something that the Board of Supervisors has done, to hear specifically kind of just the COVID updates and just some of the emergency updates, is to say we're going to do a Thursday meeting or a Friday meeting, or something else, so we can break up these monster long meetings. Because I think at some point, if it gets too late in the night and we've been talking about something for too long, I just think that we actually lose the ability to be truly informed and to make good decisions. I just want to, we're human beings. I've worked a full day as well as homeschooled 2 kids. And by what time is it? 9:30? By 10, right. I just want to say, I think we struggle to, I struggle to continue being effective as an informed decision maker, under some of those conditions. So happy to take restrictions on us. Do see the need to shrink the amount of time that people have to say. support a policy that allows for more voices, not less, but just maybe a short amount of time for comment to be taken.
Well said. Director Manier.
I don't want to repeat what everyone said for the sake of time, and as we have a conversation about not repeating what we already support. So the only thing that I want to add new to this conversation is that in looking at our current board policy, and I don't know if this was really made clear, but we're not trying to change the board policy to have this like 20-minute limit. Our board policy currently says that that we can, well, if the president can, with the board's approval, limit to 20 minutes. So I'm with Director Medina. I don't think there's any changes that we need to make to the policy. There are better ways that in practice, we can be more efficient, but I just wanted to make that clear because it wasn't super clear to me at first that what we're reading in the agenda item is actually the current board policy. So we're not trying to change anything per se. I just wanted to make that clear.
And I think Director Close had her hand up also.
Yeah, I don't want to really repeat anything anyway. I'm all for as much public comment as we can possibly get and still make it reasonable and really give people a chance to talk, and a number of people a chance to talk. I think we just need to be more efficient. And it's gotten sort of out of control. It's snowballed in the, I don't know, the past year and a half or so, and it's gotten longer and longer. And so there are some management things we can do in looking at awards, for example. How do we do those more efficiently? And so I think those are the things that we really need to be looking at. And the last thing we need to be looking at is limiting public comment, but limiting it by time so that you still hear from a number of people is, I think, a good thing. And no, President Fong, I never would have limited to 20 minutes, but for the record, but never. Now I got sidetracked. Oh, so one thing that I think that would be helpful is I think it would be helpful for people to know about when stuff is going to come up. And we have a decent idea of how big an item is going to be when we plan the agenda, of how much comment we're going to get. And so for that reason, so you don't have to sit in front of the TV or the screen for hours and hours and hours, maybe we could ahead of time decide, on this agenda item, we're going to make it an hour. This agenda item, we're going to make it a half an hour, something like that. So folks can look at the agenda and have some ballpark idea of when things are going to land, so that if they want to make public comment, they have an opportunity to do that without sitting through a 2 or 3 or 4 hour board meeting. That's my only novel comment. Thanks.
Did everyone get to speak? Director McCormick.
I agree that we shouldn't be changing a board policy if it's working and the flexibility is already built in. However, I'm looking at it and I don't see any limits on us. And I think that might be something we should consider. Yeah, that would just help our meetings be more efficient. And, I think we all have our things that we're extremely passionate about, but, and again, allowing for flexibility, but it might be something we want to add in there just so that we're, we have some parameters as well.
That's a suggestion, and we can think about that. We also have our own norms, and we have our own self-survey that we're going to be talking about next. Director Close?
Real quick, there is one thing that we can do that I think one time I did do, is that it is in Robert's rules that a board member can, on a specific item, make a motion to limit comment by the board member. So if we know if things are going long, and I think you can deal with it like on an ad hoc basis.
You're going to have to point the way to that piece of it.
That's actually Omar's job.
Oh yeah, Omar, you're really
genius. I just know it exists in there somewhere, but I bet he can find the page.
Motion to limit debate or motion to limit discussion is what I was going to say. And again, that goes to agenda management, where as we're running a meeting, we see these types of things are going to happen. We could, call for the president could call for, request to limit debate, without objection, on that particular item. And that's just how long we're going to spend on whether it be taking questions or discussing an item that helps us manage how long the meeting will go, without necessarily putting it into policy that forever limits us on everything, right? So it exists and the flexibility is there, I think, for when we need it.
I also want to make sure that people know in advance so they're not just hanging around forever, just waiting and not knowing that they're going to be limited. Director Lopez, did you have a comment on this? No, okay. All right, so I think what I'm hearing is that we are not changing a board policy, and that wasn't actually the intent tonight. I wanted to hear from you, and we wanted to have it in public discussion. We all agree that we want to hear from more people, and we know that in the Zoom thing, when I'm looking at the participants and I'm looking at hands raised, I keep saying 2 more, and then 2 more, and then 2 more, so it goes on another 30 minutes. So we could think about limiting with the Robert's Rules of Order thing, and we need to think about, and Diane, I know you have a hand raised, so all of you said, and we're nodding, that we need to limit ourselves. Diane, Superintendent Kudamora.
Okay, so a couple of comments were made about stacking the agenda, those kinds of things. I do have to share with you that our agendas are much smaller than they used to be, where we are not putting as many items on as we were in the past. I'm not saying, that I'm just telling you that. Beth Burke, the moderator, in the last meeting or maybe the meeting before, like the last couple of meetings, we would actually figure out what the time was and count the hands and mark them, and then we would call for we're closing here, and then we would get those people on. And I think that worked well. And so we can do that in the future. I have to balance the business of the district with the other items that need to come aboard as well. And so I just want the board to please be aware of that I can't stop business items if they need to come forward. And there also happens to be a very high profile kind of item. So I will look at agendas, and we do look at what are going to be kind of high volume items. And I will say we've been wrong sometimes. We think it's going to be a high volume and it turns out not to be. And it's something we didn't expect to, get as much, got a lot. So very difficult to predict all of you, like what you're going to do. So if we can just work together on this, and there can be some self regulation, and I think that would be great. I'm looking at awards. I'm looking at principal reports, how we can do them differently, how we can, just looking at how we can do our whole agenda a little bit differently to save time, not forget about why we're here, which are kids, and not get too wrapped up in the business items, but knowing that those have to come forward as well. So just want to say that.
Yes, it's very difficult to make hard decisions, have intelligent conversations after 10 p.m. We cannot be doing important things at midnight. So thank you, Dr.
And we have a hand raised, sorry. We have a hand raised.
Whose hand?
Micah Carlin Goldberg.
Public comments.
Yes. Moderator. We have a comment.
If anyone else would like to raise their hand for item E6, the first comment will be from Micah Carlin Goldberg.
Good evening. I'll try not to take too much of your time. I appreciate the intent to shorten the amount of time that the board speaks, as well as thinking about how to make it so that enough people in the public can have their voice heard without running things into 1 a.m. I noted that the 3 of the first 4 people who spoke on this item spoke for over 3 minutes apiece. Ed Sheffield was the only one that did not. And then after people started paying attention to that, you were all talking under 2 minutes each, some under 1 minute, but your total time for this discussion that we had about how long to take was 23 minutes. So just putting that in your head. Doing the math on your minimum number or maximum number of people, if you impose the rule as written in the board policy, is 6 people talking for 3 minutes in a 20-minute span. If you drop it to 2 minutes, that goes up to 10 people. That's a 2/3 drop from your 1 hour. I just wanted to put the math out there so you guys can think about it and see the numbers. So thank you.
That's why Mike is going to be great as our tech TOSA.
Maybe Mike could keep the stats for us for every meeting.
And there are no more hands raised.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Medina.
Just since we're on it, I don't know if we could look into maybe some sort of like a timer feature like we have during regular meetings where people could see how much time they have. I think that helps with people trying to like finish when they're going to speak. But I think it would also help us as board members to also kind of track what Micah did, track how long we're speaking. I don't know if that exists for Zoom, but I think it'd be good if we can incorporate that somehow.
We will check it out. In fact, Mr. Goldberg, could you check it out and let me know? Thank you.
Okay. It could look like this. It could be me holding this up.
There's some, I am positive now with all of this online Zoom that there is a add-on that we can do in this, even if the clock has its own box as a member. So.
Right. Okay, so. All right, so that was a good discussion. Thank you, because we do all value public comment, input. We value not making tough decisions at midnight, and we know that we have important work to do, and our discussion is important, and that we all recognize that we could be more succinct. All right, so I will stop. So no more action on this, I think. We're just going to leave that as discussion. This brings us to E7. It's another discussion. I brought this to us. It's the Board of Education will discuss a self-evaluation protocol. So per board policy, we need to do this. We want to do this, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time. This is board self-evaluation. It's board policy 9400. And I have I've taken many different samples together of different self-evaluations by boards. CSBA was a resource. And I have one here for your perusal and your input. And as a governance team, you know, when we think about being a good governance team, these are in certain sections that really help with our work as a governance team, that we're sticking to policy, that we listen to each other, that we are empathetic, that we listen to the public, that we keep our eyes on the ball and not get into the weeds, because that is not where we're supposed to be living. So I had a timeline for us. I'd like us to possibly get this, see what we think about it tonight. If there are any revisions to it we need to do, we could bring it back next week or in the next meeting. And then I'd like to bring it back after we all complete the survey. And this is a public document, so everything we put on there is going to be public, and we will discuss our own self-evaluation in public, hopefully on September 23rd, if we can get that, we can get through this. So with that, questions?
Can I just say that this is a Google form, but I didn't want to have the form live, and that the choices are 1 through 5, totally agree, totally disagree, and everything in between. So just so you know what the scale is.
And there is room for your own typing in the comment box, which also will be public, could be disclosed. I take it you're all reading it.
Can we maybe do any public comments if there's any?
While you're reading?
Well, I mean, nobody's saying anything.
So no questions. Director Close.
Yeah, the first, I guess I just have two comments. The first one is that the first question I think is really a staff issue. It's really our evaluation of the staff's packet. I think if we were evaluating ourselves, then we would say, we read it, we prepared, so that we weren't doing that in real time or not prepared. I mean, sometimes that's why meetings take long too, is if people don't actually do the readings and they have questions that were answered in the packet. So the first question I don't think is like a really board evaluation thing. I think it's a staff evaluation, but the rest of them I like. The one thing that I'm wondering is that during this process, these are all about, except for like the one that says I asked, and I talked about your own preparation. I asked specific questions. Everything is about the board, the board. And I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be a good exercise, whether it was just part of this or not, where it was recommended that we do sort of truly a self-evaluation of our board member performance. What is our personal contribution to this, the success or not of the governance team? That's it. Thank you, Lori.
In response to that, Director Close,
President Fong.
would you say that the first question is covered in the second question, or is it different to you?
I think those are two different questions, and the first one isn't a board evaluation question.
Okay, would you do me a favor? Would you?
I would say, yeah, actually, I do think it's two different questions. Like, did I ask sufficient questions is different from I read the packet, or it seemed like the board read the packet. Those are two different things. Because you read the packet and sometimes that's enough, sometimes that's not enough. We're encouraged to, and it's a good practice to bring questions early to staff so that we don't make meetings really long and ask questions that don't need to be asked in public. And also it also helps prepare staff to know what other people are thinking and what they might want to present in their presentation to the board to answer these questions. So that's just a good practice to ask. So that's board prep number 2 is different and important. And I would say question number 1 just says, did we read the packet?
And so you're suggesting also, for example, in question 3, instead of the board establishes and maintains, well, here's
some of these are first person and some of these are the board. Like, it's whether or not, how the behavior ones they're all just sort of different. Some of them are all board. Are we as a board acting in this way? But then also it seems like a good exercise for the ones that can be applied to you as one single human, one single board member, that we do undertake that exercise as well. And those are, probably, I don't know, about a third of them.
I also think that we are a governance team. We're individuals, but we are a governance team. So are we effective as a governance team, which is why I think I finally phrased them this way.
Right.
Okay, move on.
Well, that's absolutely true.
Director Manieri,
yes.
And then Director Medina.
Just so the board policy does say that the board shall be evaluated as a whole. Individual board members also are encouraged to use the evaluation process as an opportunity to privately assess their own personal performance. So, I mean, it's in there, right? Like, we're encouraged to do that, to evaluate ourselves, but our policy says shall be evaluated as a whole.
Director Medina.
First, I'd like to move to extend the meeting to as late as 10:30 p.m.
Second.
It's been moved that we extend the meeting to 10:30 by Director Medina and seconded by Director De La Cruz. May we have the vote, please? Adina?
Director Lopez.
Wait.
Aye.
Director,
Stop, Adina.
Director Close.
You can just say all in favor on this. I'm just trying to help.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you guys that one time I did that and we said, no, you can't do that. You have to have a motion. So
No, this is all in favor. Aye.
There is a motion.
Yeah.
so we're going to go with the motion. So we are voting.
You're voting, but you don't have to do a roll call vote.
You don't have to do a roll call vote. This is the one where you get to just say all in favor. Just trying to help.
Okay, now that we've wasted 2 minutes on this.
I know. This is something we kind of.
Fine with all in favor. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Just for clarification, just so we could do this properly. If you say all in favor, then you got to allow for opportunity to ask anybody opposed. The better way to do it is, are there any objections? And then if nobody objects, then it's kind of unanimous. So.
Okay, that's the more sophisticated way to do that. Let's try that. Let me practice this. Are there any objections to the time extension to 10:30 p.m.? Seeing none, we have 36 minutes left here. Okay, thank you. Director Medina, did you have a comment on the
I did almost forgot what we're talking about now. What are we talking about? The self-evaluation. I think I just wanted to highlight that to me, this is a self-evaluation tool of where the self is the body, the governing board. And so in relation to that question about is the board packet, the preparation, I don't see it as preparation in terms of well, that's the staff that did that. I think of us being held accountable to the public. And so are we as a board having packets that are prepared adequately enough for not only ourselves to be prepared and well informed, but is the public getting sufficient information from that? So that's the way that I look at it. As a board, are we doing a good job in terms of the packets that are created that are informative enough, right? That our members of the public can see that. Are we as a body doing a good job? And I think the self as the individual that Director Close talked about, I think that's a good self-practice. But in terms of the ultimate outcome of whatever this document is, it's about us being held accountable to the community and how are we doing in relation to the community. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Any questions?
Did the questions came from CSBA?
The questions came from probably 5 different sources, and I took, best governance practices for school boards and made sure that we had something on everything that was comprehensive and not very long.
Okay.
So this is all me. It could be arbitrary. It can change it. There's no, there's no shame here. Just tell me what you think works and doesn't work. So I've been listening to what you're saying. Do we have any public comment on this?
This is a call for public comment on E7. Please raise your hand if you want to make public comment on E7. And there are no hands raised.
Okay. Board, with your permission, I can bring this back to you next meeting and we can approve it, and then we can bring it back. We can take the survey ourselves, and then we'll bring it back at the next meeting or the next meeting, however long it takes us to get through a correct questionnaire that we like and that we will take and that we discuss it in public. Does that work?
So can I be clear on what are you going to take edits on this document, or I can take the edits and, mark up this document for the next meeting? How would you like to move forward? How would you like me to move forward?
I think what I heard was Director Close was saying it should be more personal. I was feeling, and another board member felt, that it was board as a whole, as a governance team, and we had concerns about the first question because it looked like it was a question about district preparation of the packet. Yet I think when Omar Medina was talking about how he read it, actually that was my intent. So maybe or Diane, you can help me clarify that first question. So it's like the intent that we are prepared, that we are taking what we need from the packet. That we're prepared.
Director Close has her hand up.
Director Close.
Can I just make a clarification, because I seem to have completely miscommunicated. I do not think that we should have a public. I was saying that I think it would be a good exercise that we would all be encouraged to do, to undertake these questions as individuals while we think about our board conduct, because we can evaluate each other and as a group, and I think that's a good idea. But how we actually behave, how we show up as a group, it reflects a lot of how we show up as individuals, particularly when you talk about, how we behave. There's the questions about how we behaved with each other and those things. So my suggestion was that we be given some questions that were that we just be encouraged to evaluate ourselves as individual board members as an exercise, but not that we do some sort of public self-evaluation of ourselves as individuals. It is true, this is a board evaluation. So I just want to make that clear. And we have nothing to do with the preparation of the packet. I agree with Omar that we should have a good packet for the public, but we just don't have anything to do with that, except to the extent that the board president does, working with the superintendent. Just want to clarify those things. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. Director Close, did you say that we need to have something else that we really self-evaluate privately, individually?
No.
Yeah.
I think there should, no. I was just pointing out that some of these things really relate to our individual behavior, and that we, as we undertake to answer these questions, that we as a personal exercise should be encouraged, whether it's just a line in the form or something, to take this opportunity to evaluate our own personal conduct.
Got it. Noted.
Well, might I suggest that you all take it and see how it sits with you to answer it, and from that may come, whoa, this question makes no sense, or I'm not sure how I can evaluate us or myself based on this question, and then we go from there. How about that? I send the link out, the live link, you guys, and then you respond to it in the next meeting. Look at it all, look at it together, look at the results together. What about that?
I see 1 thumb up, 2, 3, 4.
Woohoo, I earned my pay today. Okay.
Lopez, yes, you're going to do this too.
All right, I will send the link out tomorrow, and you will respond so in a timely fashion, 1 week, so that we can collate all the responses and look at the comments, and we will provide as a part of the packet the actual responses so that you guys can go over them in public together. How's that?
So that would be bringing it back to us on September 9th?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I saw everybody's thumbs up. So we don't need a vote or anything? This is just an agreement?
Yeah, because you're not really settled on anything yet, in my opinion. So.
Okay.
And it was a discussion, so we couldn't take a vote on anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but would you agree, Director Medina, this is a discussion. This is a part of the discussion because we got to kind of try it out, test it out, see how it works, make adjustments after that.
Yeah, just guidance to give, discussion to give guidance. That's fine.
Yep. Okay, so I'll send it out with a due date tomorrow, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Kittamore.
No problem.
We are moving on to the consent items on F. So we need, let's see, F2 through F12, looks like.
Move to approve F2 through F12.
Second.
That was moved by Director McCormick and seconded by Director Sheffield. Can we have that roll call vote, please? Adina.
Director Lopez.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Close.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye, thank you. That carries. And we are now on approval of the minutes. Item G1, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting held on July 22nd, 2020.
Move to approve
Second.
July 22nd, 2020.
Thank you. That was moved by Director McCormick and seconded by Director Medina. May we have that vote, please, Adina?
Director Lopez.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Close.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye, thank you. Are there any board member requests for information tonight?
Wait,
We have another minutes to approve.
Minute number 2. Oh my goodness, my printer cut it off. Approval of the minutes. That's right, we postponed that. The regular board meeting held on August 12th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
You.
Amendment or clarification. The minutes as presented, the footer on the bottom left didn't insert the date on all the pages. If you could insert the date, that would be an amendment to the minutes as presented.
One more time, Director Medina, can you repeat that?
The bottom left footer, it just left the template text of date of meeting. It didn't actually put the date of meeting on all the pages. So that seems to be the footer. And the other thing, it's fine for these, but I think in terms of consistency, how, again, Director Lopez's vote is recorded, you know, it's like for everybody, it's like their vote and then their name. For him, it's his name and then his vote, right? So I think if we could just do it consistently one way for everybody, and stylistically, it makes more sense. It was done adequately with the abstention on the July 22nd meetings. I think I would just prefer that just because it drives me nuts. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, so let's see. Director McCormick, you made that motion. Do you accept that?
Yes.
Yes.
Amendment, yes.
Whoever said to accept the friendly amendment.
Accept the friendly amendment.
No, I said whoever seconded it.
Oh.
Who seconded it?
Sheffield.
Director Sheffield. He's nodding. May we have that vote, please, Adina?
Director Lopez.
Aye.
Director McCormick.
Aye.
Director Sheffield.
Aye.
Director Manieri.
Aye.
Director De La Cruz.
Aye.
Director Close.
Aye.
Director Medina.
Aye.
President Fong.
Aye, thank you. Are there any requests for information from board members tonight?
President Fong, we have developed a task list, and so I know that there are two things that we're going to follow up on. One is Foundation Fund Education Code, and the other one is high-risk electives in regard to FAPA classes. I just didn't want anybody to think that I forgot about those. Just transitioning, Melanie Martin and Adina Flores have done a tremendous job. They are poring over these minutes. Director Medina really trying hard to get them right, I can assure you. And I've encouraged them to go ahead and just ask you if there's a question about, something. They really want to do it right and get it right. They also have been, along with the help of Deputy Superintendent Edson, putting this new agenda together because we're phasing out agenda. CSBA is phasing out agenda online. So yeah, so kudos to them. Director Medina has his hand up.
I just want to say there is an immense improvement, and in these most recent ones, I loved a lot of the detail that was captured in the minutes. So just to add the kudos to that, there was a lot more detail, and I was just like, ooh. So yeah.
Do you two hear that? I hope you two hear that, because I'm proud of you, because that's what we've been working towards. So I'll tell you too, those two women have pretty much figured out what board policies have not come forward and dug through, and I mean, in just a short amount of time. I think 2 days, they have figured out, going back to the spring, what policies, and put them into folders, all electronic. I mean, it is fantastic. So yay, Melanie and Adina. Woo!
Thank you from the entire board. All right, and with that, everybody, thank you so much for being here, and have a very good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody.